morning and well, so first of all, good everything, everybody.
Everything,
Good everything,
everybody.
everybody.
You as well.
Yes, thank you. I got up this morning and I was trying to finish the first episode of this Stax documentary, Soulville, USA on Max. And this record is credited, of course, to Atlantic Records. But Carla and her daddy Rufus,
Walking the dog.
yes, and I thought about it because Tennessee, it's in the
Oh,
heart of
Lord.
Tennessee,
Of
and,
course.
the first 10 minutes made me so angry watching this thing that I was like
Oh, really? I haven't opened it. I figured when you started with the Queen of Memphis Soul, I think that she was 16 when she wrote that.
17, well,
17,
yeah.
17. Okay. I figured you must be digging in them stacks crates. So you said the first 10 minutes set you off.
You know what? Yes, Carla Thomas, Rufus Thomas, one of the best DJs probably in all the land ever, definitely in the South. But you realize in that moment because it takes us to Memphis State, the first 8 students to integrate that school, and it's
About
like
that.
7,000 students, and they're being called the N word every day. And some reporter
Mhm.
stuck a mic in front of this young lady's face and was like, uh, so are you gonna stick with the other niggers? And I was like, a
Wow.
reporter's asking that, and you could see the young lady's face. She was like, no, I think I'll just stick to myself. And
Wow.
I was
The-
just
the-
thinking
the-
about the trauma of integrating, a university, and then the music. One of the musicians was saying because everything was segregated, he never had a problem. Because he never had to confront white people. Even though every sign, we don't serve coloreds, whites
Well, good.
only.
Good. We don't eat colors, so that works.
Yeah. But I
I
was
mean,
like,
so I don't know. I guess did they bring up at all Lemoyne Owen?
I didn't get that far. I'm like,
I mean, they certainly brought up Memphis State, which I could give. Well, I don't know if I can give less of a damn about now the University of Memphis. It was Memphis State when we were in school. Of course, that was Keith Lee. Remember the basketball player from West Memphis, Arkansas. And what's that? What's that? Curated redneck that was the coach. I think he died. They called him the gambler, the riverboat gambler, whatever. He's been on the Mississippi River. You remember this earlier, Keith? What's Basketball Holmes? I think was one of the basketball players. Anyway, he's not around. Dana, somebody. And he had long hair, had the suits, and kind of like a Tennessee version of Shaquille O'Neal's boss down there at Louisiana State, Dale, whatever. Anyway, it's not important. But I'm saying we never thought about Memphis State. In fact, the black students in Memphis
I don't know.
came to Tennessee State. So I mean, they didn't go to Memphis State unless they were employees, basketball players. Shout out to Tammy Sawyer, by the way. Good to see Tammy Sawyer yesterday, and thanks to our brother Lamont King inviting her on to.
Okay, all right. Before we get into this, because I'm bringing this up for
But anyway, I'm just thinking about. I don't
I
know.
sent you this for a particular reason, but let me just say, yesterday morning at 7 a.m., I turned on my SiriusXM app and I heard what was only in my mind before that, something that left a smile on my face for the whole 3 hours, including Tammy Sawyer, including Ike Speaks,
I
including
speak.
yes, you and Lamont, and it was how you have an idea. And it was just to me,
We know how you have an idea, architect, because that was in your mind. Then we.
but I'm also like teaching at the same time because ideas come over years of experience. So they're not like I didn't just wake up and like, oh, it was being in community and then having both of you and then understanding both of you and then also having done radio. So sometimes people are like, you cut that person off. And I'm like, yeah, because I absolutely know people are predictable what's coming next. And I'm also in my mind understanding people in their cars or whatever, and what do they need to listen to? Do they need to listen to this blather for the next 10 minutes or 5 minutes or 2 minutes? No. So no, we're going to move on from that and then bring in other ideas. But I thought about both of you because of the radio mechanics of Lamont, who has done radio, was on the Russ Parr show for 6 years, morning show.
Yeah.
Been on my show on Fridays,
Yeah.
and he's quick, he's smart, he knows how to blah blah blah. But then I was like, the weight, if we're going to have somebody sit in that seat, which was once the domain of Joe Madison, and y'all were in his studio, it should be somebody with the gravitas to be able to interact and talk about anything, and also have the personality that, because it's morning. I'm getting on my way. I need to be, you need to let me know how I
This morning,
can get
right?
up and be good for the rest of the day. Set my day with intention. So
Yeah.
I just want to say thank you for trusting me to say yes. I
No,
appreciate you so much. You don't
listen,
even know.
I appreciate you. For the first week too, after coming back live, I mean, you brewed that in your mind, and then you pulled the trigger. So the whole week, and once you asked, and I said, "Oh yeah, I'll do that." Listening to the pace to get a sense of what was going on, and then yesterday was different than the days before, and then it was different than the days before. So to hear, Don, to hear Kevin, to hear, yeah, you let it off Monday. I mean, so to get a sense of that pacing, and then yeah, it was really something to be in that space. Shout out to Daryl, and he made sure everything was there. Catherine came in, Alex. They really that production team was crack, and it did feel like Joe Madison could have walked in at any moment because the studio looks virtually undisturbed. Although we couldn't find the cuss jar, I think maybe the family took the cuss jar, so we had to.
Create your own.
Well, yeah,
Okay.
Lamont said a
Yeah.
digital cuss jar might work. I said, okay, but that Black Eagle statue is still there on the desk. I said, man, I don't want to touch nothing. Just me just sitting here. And then to start, I mean, it was, and for everybody who has Sirius XM and who heard the conversation, it was fascinating. Even just that leading out, how we got to the serendipity, because I read paper every day, and Lamont said, "You got the physical paper," and start talking about paper boys, and then had a paper girl, paper woman, who delivered papers as recently as a couple of years ago during COVID in Utah. You can't predict that. It was really, something. Yeah, and Ike and Tammy were perfect coming in to talk about politics, to talk about, and I didn't know, I should have known that Ike was a 5%er, had grown up 5%er. So even that was like, oh really? Oh, we gotta have a conversation. So yeah, I mean, and then the diversity in terms of regional diversity, people call from different places. Obviously the news of the day was there. I mean, the whole idea that the Department of Justice and the great fail upward Merrick Garland is going to, take on now the Live Nation. But then the brother calls in and said, "Oh no, I drove tour buses. Let me tell you how this impacts the people down the food chain."
See,
You can't predict that.
this is, when I was watching Stacks just for the first like 10-15 minutes,
Hmm.
the self-segregation, the angering self-segregation, like to not want to be around other people.
Hmm.
Immediately there was this white boy who was a musician, and he was like, sweeping up. He was like the janitor, but then he was like, can I, so because Stacks was undercover bringing in blacks and whites, when young when this young lady was taken to meet with the Atlantic people because Stacks didn't have enough distribution. He was like, well, let's go to a restaurant. And they were like, yeah, no, there's no restaurant in Memphis where a black person and a white person could sit down together. And he's like, okay, well, meet me in my hotel. And she had to come in through the freight elevator because the hotel that he was staying in wouldn't let black people in the front lobby. And I just think about the ways in which, I get to sit on Sirius XM and talk to people from all walks of life. 30% of our audience identify as melanemic. They're from as far as Seattle. We got the West Coast. We had an Ontario, Canada caller last week, Toronto, Mexico, all over. So you get to hear perspectives from folk. From Utah, you think, who's in Utah listening to Urban View? There's a lot of people. This country is actually not as divided as it seems, and it is absolutely as divided as it seems, and that's our detriment. And the value of being in community every day with people from all walks of life means you get to know folk. You get to ask questions. You get to get out of your own biases. I had a horrible guest. Well, let me not say it that way. I'm sorry.
Is
I
that
had
there? No.
And now I probably shouldn't even say it because I preface it that way. I had a guest on yesterday who feels to me so stuck in their opinion about things. And then
Mm.
I'm wondering, have you traveled? Who do you hang out with? If your whole entire lens of life is through this little Bible, and I'm gonna say little Bible because it's so much more than the Bible. And if you just put your whole life in the hands of the council at Nicene that have put together, cobbled together these books to indoctrinate people into a way of knowing so that they can be controlled for eternity. And then you project that out. If the God is the mighty God and gave us all free will, why are you taking it away through your ideals and then being rigid in it? Like won't even sit back. As crazy as it seems, I actually am very open to their ideas, and I like want to learn, but don't come with no information. Don't come without, which is why again I'm so appreciative, because you've read, you've done, you've traveled, and so when
Mhm.
you open your mouth, you put your whole brand on display, and it is so
We
beautiful.
all do.
It
No
is so
question.
beautiful. It is so beautiful.
No
I just wanted
question.
to say that.
I mean, it was. Thank you. I just, yeah, listening to how you interact with people, and you're right. You don't, whatever people's opinions are. Now that doesn't mean there's not going to be dialogue and there's going to be pushback and give and take. But that takes a certain generosity of spirit, because we all end up living and dying and breathing the same air. And it's difficult. I mean, how much of the past do we, quote unquote, let go when we realize that it is the past that frames how we move through the world today? And I will watch the Stacks documentary. I saw it in passing a couple of times. I said, but then I felt like I didn't want to enter the narrative in a way that would make me, like you, I think like all of us, angry, because I spend a great deal of time. I look at things through those long view lenses, so I know that the documentary is trash. In terms of, I mean, I know that. I mean, when I say that, I say trash in terms of framework. We can't look at it because the frameworks all have an objective. Their objective is to perfect the American experiment. I have no investment in that. My investment is in human beings. So, our commitment has to be to human improvement. But this funky narrative that can't be redeemed, that will have to be transformed, is the investment. So even in any narrative that has us enter the conversation in trauma is not useless, but it's very nearly close. In other words, yeah, you can't. There's no place in Memphis where a black and a white can sit down. Actually, that's not true. There are plenty of places. They're in the black community. Do you see black people? Stop. We could go get a plate of chitlins right now.
Right,
But I
right,
mean,
right,
but
right.
the narrative is not gonna. They may
Okay,
get to that.
okay. But where we are right now in 2024, and the thing that I was gleaning from this for me is that there's a whole generation. I realized I woke up and I was like, I'm the only oldest person on Urban View, and
Wow.
wait a minute,
It's very young. It's a very young lineup.
right. I was like, wait a minute. Okay, I'm an elder now. But what that also means is that I know and I've seen some things, that people in their 20s and 30s and 40s have not even experienced. And the way this world is right now, not just with the banning of books, but again, the erasure of momentum of memory and all of that.
Absolutely.
The people don't know that you couldn't sit somewhere, even though maybe they saw an eye on the prize, maybe they know it, but to walk through the lens of the folk that experienced it firsthand, I think is useful. You are so far down the road that sometimes people can't even see where you are. Do you know what I'm saying? Because you read this, you digested it, you study it, you teach
Yeah.
it,
Yeah.
and so there's an entry point, and if it allows us to have an entry point to have a discussion, then
I would agree with you.
I understand centering trauma should never be something that we celebrate, but there's so many
Because
people
we
that
didn't send to Trump. See,
right.
that's the trick. I'm not far down the road. I think that we're all squarely where we are. It really came to me again last week when Miss Minnie Jean came into the law school and said, and listening to the Little Rock Nine. They never, all the narratives have them as willing enterers into violence, that they did this for democracy. They did this to improve their lives. And every one of them said our teachers were better than those teachers. In fact, and I'll just mention this book, the first 25. The first 25 came out about 6 years ago. The first 25, an oral history of the desegregation of Little Rock's public junior high schools. Laverne Bell Tolliver was one of those first 25 students who went to the middle schools. Yeah, it's what we call now the middle schools, junior high schools. She's a professor, associate professor at the University of Arkansas Little Rock School of Social Work. And I mentioned that because, and a lot of people now talking about Black studies, what it is, what it isn't. It's very popular now. Everybody on one side, from the radicals who say it's black study and we're doing, all the way to the other side saying, black history is American history. It's an absurd kind of thing in a context, I suppose. But none of it's black studies, as far as I'm concerned. None of it's Africana studies. Africana studies has to have a long view lens. Otherwise, it's not Africana studies. It doesn't start in 1619 or 1528, for that matter, when the Spanish bring some captive Africans to what is now South Carolina. Shout out to Nancy Mace. We'll get there to Miss Nancy Mace and her re-gerrymandered district and 30,000 Africans taken out of the district, and that magnificent servant of white supremacy, Clarence Thomas, and the opinion that we saw come down this week, Alexander versus South Carolina state branch of the NAACP. But it doesn't start in 1528 when the Spanish brought us here. It starts when the first human beings started. If it doesn't start where the first human beings start, it's not Africana studies. It's the study of blacks in contexts. So to look at everything through the long view lens reminds us that we have never stopped being Africans, and we have never stopped being humans. So I don't look at it as being far ahead. Sure, absolutely, in terms of study, in terms of work. That's why we're committed day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, into being in this space and convening this space around the most important thing. Because all of that study, all of that contemplation, all of that continuing listening, thinking, dialoguing, speaking, moving back and forth, reading, which in some ways is writing in reverse, listening, which is some way speaking in reverse, really get all of that is designed to elicit the chords of our common humanity. So in reading this edited volume, where the desegregation of the Little Rock public junior high schools, East Side, Forest Heights, Pulaski Heights, Southwest, and West Side, in 1961 and 1962, because remember, after 1957, Orville Faubus, the white nationalist governor of Arkansas, canceled schools in Arkansas. And they canceled schools for several years, not as many as Virginia, where they did it for 5 years. But so people, and then they take your public dollars and put them in the white academies, the birthplace of what we now consider in many ways the charter school movement, the voucher movement, to privatize education. That's what they're after. But in that process, we become figments of white imagination. That's why we had to create an Africana studies framework, a methodology specific to Africana studies, not the interesting study of black stuff in social sciences or humanities, not the interesting integration of blacks in the sciences, the natural sciences. No. That's all important work, but is not Africana studies. In fact, every one of the branches in the Western Academy that is not Africana studies is white studies. And I include all those black studies programs where you just put an interest in black facts. You're putting earrings and lipstick on various farm animals and trotting them out like that's black studies. It is not. You have to have a methodology, a process that connects to that long view genealogy. And when you do, you will recognize that in that first category, the social structure category, what is the context in which anybody or anything we're studying exists in time and space at any particular moment in time and space? Another way of thinking about this, who are the African people that we are studying and following through time and space to other formations, other people, other institutional formations? What is the social structure that we're looking at? All these documentaries, all these conversations are social structure documentaries. But when you start listening to the people, who are they to each other? What institutions did they create? What formations did they either inherit and shape to their purposes, or move and to create for themselves to manage how they move through time and space? The governance category. Who are we to each other? Well, that's where you find that I'm not far ahead at all. Just like Professor Laverne Bell Tolliver writes in this book, The First 25. In fact, let me just give you a quick, put my clock here because I'm just going to mention this quickly. Put my little sand thing here, 5-minute sand thing. The introduction to the edited volume, The First 25, is by Joel Anderson. Joel Anderson is the Chancellor Emeritus, was at the time the Chancellor Emeritus of the University of Arkansas, Little Rock. And he says something here in praising Laverne Bell Tolliver, Dr. Laverne Bell Tolliver. He opens in the foreword of this book by saying, Dr. Laverne Bell Tolliver has rescued from the memories of 18 African Americans their experiences desegregating junior high schools. a half century ago, they were the first African American students to enroll in 5 previously all-white junior high schools in Little Rock, Arkansas. And by the way, let me pause here to remind folk that what we started last week, we're going to continue and finish this week. And I'm going to evoke something that Miss Minnie Jean said last Thursday night before last at the law school that kind of spurred this conversation over the last couple of weeks. He goes on and says they were called on to break down long-standing racial barriers while in their early teen years, a developmental stage that for most youth brings major emotional vulnerability. Goes on, but this is the paragraph I want to read that separates social structure, which is what Chancellor Emeritus Joel Anderson is writing from, and governance formation, which is what Dr. Laverne Bell Tolliver is writing from and reflecting on with 17 of her classmates who were sent into harm's way in a social structure that is absolutely anti-African. This paragraph from Chancellor Anderson. In the case of the young Laverne Bell Tolliver, she did not volunteer for the role at Forest Heights Junior High School in Little Rock, Arkansas. Her parents made that decision, which separated her from Paul Dunbar Junior High, an African American legacy school where she would have enrolled with her friends. And there it is, friends. There's the governance formation. Now, in the pages of this book, you will hear about those schools, just like when we were talking about Terrence Roberts last week, one of the Little Rock Nine, and the schools he went to. Mifflin Wistar Gibbs Elementary School, Paul Lawrence Dunbar Junior High School, where Professor Bell Tolliver would have gone had she not been volunteered for battle duty, as was Terrence Roberts, as was Minnie Jean Brown, as was the rest of the Little Rock Nine, and then these 18 and more junior high school black students. Nobody was trying to go to your funky school. We want the same budget for our walls and pipes and lunch and books. In fact, our curriculum is better than your curriculum because our curriculum makes our history mandatory and our scholars are better than your scholars. Y'all cracking the book, The Negro in Our History by Carter G. Woodson and Charles Harris Wesley? You playing with that, huh? You opening children's books with illustrations by Louise Maylou Jones? Huh? You looking at Carter Woodson's African myths and their explanations, huh? You looking at that? You ain't looking at that. You got an inferior curriculum. But somehow, this social structure want to convince us in 2024 that what we dreamt of with our whole hearts was to be up in them schools. And then that would lead, of course, to the patently absurd assertion that we are our ancestors' wildest dreams. If by wild you mean shit, that's wild, meaning crazy, then maybe. In fact, I suspect that to those who were captive, those first generations, the Olues or Casula Lewis or Cujo Lewis in Mobile, Alabama, with the rest of the folk who were kidnapped and taken on the Clotilda, as we talked about extensively in office hours when we read Barracoon. I imagine to them looking forward to 2024 and looking at the foolishness we might indeed be their wildest dreams. If by wild you mean crazy, but if by wild you mean expansive, now there'll be moments when you say in great pride, like we talked about 2 years ago, last year, the great Ed Dwight, the sculptor, whose work adorns so many different places, from Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman statues to the grounds of the South Carolina State House in Columbia, the brilliant work of Ed Dwight, the sculptor, who, of course, started part of his professional work over 50 years ago, 60 years ago, when he was recruited by the federal government to become the first black astronaut in the United States space program, who finally made it to space at 90 years old this week. So sure, our ancestors might look at Ed Dwight and say, damn, they up in space. And it can't look like me, my man. That would be a wild dream in a good sense. But the whole idea that the rest of this stuff is their wildest dream, don't, let's be serious. And let's be crystal clear about this. So the idea then that being shock troops to soften the blunt edge of white supremacy in a social structure, namely the 1950s, when the United States is still continuing to expand as a global enterprise global empire enterprise and attempting to solidify its position at the center of the post-World War II world, particularly as China and the Soviet Union present a real challenge to that, and the decolonization process that really began when people invaded Africa, Asia, and other places, but really exploded in the wake of World War II, leading ultimately to the liberation movements in Africa and Asia and the attempts to suppress them by, say, the French in Vietnam, followed by the Americans, or all over Africa, the so-called Cold War. Attempting to soften that edge, U.S. domestic policy, taking its cue from U.S. foreign policy, soft power, hard power, you know how it is. Hard power, drop 2 bombs on the Japanese. Soft power, send your music around the world through ambassadors and through commerce. Send your clothing, send your movies, send your music throughout the world. That combination, all designed to expand American power, U.S. power, domestic policy had to begin to acknowledge that, because you've got open, hard white nationalists who ain't really worried about what's going on in the Soviet Union. I just know you're a communist. Could you spell that? KKK. Anyway, the point is, this nativism threatened U.S. aspirations, at least government and business aspirations in the world. So, of course, Brown versus Board of Education had to happen. Of course, the Little Rock Nine had to happen. Remember 1956, 1957, when the Little Rock Nine are ordered into Central High School in the wake of Brown versus Board of Education, it is Louis Armstrong and Louise Armstrong overseas on one of those soft power tours when they stick that microphone in Louis Armstrong's face. And Pops says to the interviewer who says, how do you feel about the Little Rock Nine and what's going on over there? With this National Guard having to be called in, they're going to call, Eisenhower going to call in the National Guard, and Louis Armstrong calls Orville Faubus an uneducated plowboy, and he says, well, it looked like to me that Eisenhower should take that little girl by the hand and walk her up the steps to that school. I mean, that's how I feel about it. If I ain't gonna lie about it, I'm gonna tell it the way I need to tell it. And you see Louise standing next to him, kind of looking around, eyes darting like, oh my God, we over here. They done sent us over here to fight the Russians with soft power. Pops ain't never met nobody he didn't like in his life. In fact, one of the reasons he's not buried in New Orleans, according to all of the musicians who played with him, from Jack Teagarden to his bass player, Oliver Shaw, to all of them, say, you know, one of the reasons Pop's not buried in New Orleans, even though the airport is named for him and he's plastered all over the city, is because they segregated the bands. And when he got the key to the city, they wouldn't let him play with his integrated band in New Orleans. And Armstrong famously said, I remember when it wasn't a crime for cats of any color to jam. Because jazz was born interracially, even though it is absolute anchored in Africa. The drumming of the Congo, the wailing of the dirges of the Akan, the mixture of the Bamana people, all of that there in the mouth of the Mississippi. But Armstrong is like, I can't hear white people. Jack Teagarden in my band, he from Texas. Old rocking chairs got me. Old rocking chairs got your father. Cane by my side. That's Teagarden. Cane by your side. Fetch me some gin, son. You know you don't drink gin, father. For I tan your hide. My hide's already tan. That's the stuff the young people hated from Armstrong. Ozzie Davis said, they called it oofta. You clowning for the white folks. But Armstrong had a power underneath that. And as Ozzie Davis said, once he put that horn to his lips, he could kill you with that horn. But him and Teagarden playing back on the race question. But then they say Teagarden can't play in the band. This is a segregated town. Armstrong's like, no problem. When I die, stick me right up there in New York. My point is that this question of our common humanity has never been an issue for people of African descent. And the narratives that are forced upon us, no matter how well-meaning, now increasingly by these brilliant Negroes who somehow have no long view, stick us in a posture of narrative erasure that requires us to break with any of those narrative frames to recover the governance formations, the ways of knowing, the cultural meaning making that we always had so that we can see ourselves in those films. So, what I'm saying about that is, I'm not far ahead. I'm saying we have to restore how we felt at that moment in 1957 in Little Rock. As these young people now, elders, are telling each other, no, we didn't volunteer for that shit. I mean, we had to break down the walls and stuff like that, but I'm perfectly fine going to Dunbar. And in Memphis, there's Lemoyne Owens now. That's the school Marion Barry went to coming out of Mississippi. I'm not sure of anything with these documentaries, but they may make a passing remark. I wonder if anybody who ever jammed at Stax ever spent any time in Lemoyne Owens, or for that matter, George Washington Carver High School, I'm sure will be brought up in Memphis. You know, one of the flagship black schools, high schools in Memphis. Maybe somebody will bring up Bishop Isaac Lane, just outside of Memphis in Jackson, Tennessee, Lane College, the CME Church, Charles Mason, Osgood Mason, not Osgood Mason, the white woman, Mason, CM Mason, Bishop Mason, all that music that came out of me. I'm sure all will be brought in, but will it be brought in a way that becomes something other than a nice pair of earrings and a nice bracelet on whiteness? No, because these narratives are invested in projecting the perfectibility of the American experiment instead of tearing it up root and branch and doing something different, armed with the knowledge of what has happened before. We've seen this trick before. Black people dropping out of the sky as saints, Fannie Lou Hamer, Martin Luther King. Martyrs, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, all for the perfectibility of America. It is absurd. If you talk to the people who lived through it, they will tell you that, which is why today I wanted to close the loop on this. As I said, that Africana Studies framework is anchored in some serious considerations. For me, we have to look at everything through a long view, beginning with the origin of humanity and moving through time and space to the moment we're in. Because African people are the parents of the species. These recent centuries of general challenge, the invention of race, which we didn't do, which was thrust upon us, had a unintended consequence. And we've talked about Sterling Stuckey many times, Michael Gomez, and so many others who write about this, who speak about this, who work through this, and all of the meaning makers. I'm going through a series of interviews with these meaning makers. There was a book published, let me see what the copyright date is, 1993. So 30 years ago, by Arthur Taylor. Arthur Taylor was a master cultural meaning maker, a so-called jazz musician, played with Coleman Hawkins, Bud Powell, Sonny Rollins, who still walks the earth, Charlie Parker, Miles Davis, John Coltrane, Thelonious Monk, and others. He edited a volume where he just sat and talked with his contemporaries, musicians, cultural meaning makers. It's always good to get those insights. Who are we to each other? The name of the book is Notes and Tones, Arthur Taylor, musician to musician interviews. Among those interviewed, Art Blakey, Betty Carter, Don Cherry, Kenny Clark, bebop. Ornette Coleman, as Gangstar said, he was another soul man. Miles Davis, KD, Kenny Durham, the great John Burks Gillespie, Dizzy Gillespie. Hampton Halls, Freddie Hubbard, Elvin Jones, the great Elvin Jones, playing with the Elvin Jones in those videos, playing with John Coltrane, quartet and quintet, and the steam coming up off his head because they're in Scandinavia somewhere in the studio. It's cold. He playing so hard, the sweat coming in, you see the steam, right? Elvin Jones. Carmen McRae, Max Roach, my goodness, North Carolina. Sonny Rollins, Nina Simone, Randy Weston, my man, the great elder. African Rhythms, his memoir. I encourage you all to get that, coming out of Brooklyn, that son of Garveyites, who was himself a Garveyite to the day he made transition in his 90s. Notes and Tones, just reading that, realizing that these people work together, regardless of color, regardless of class, and that the society, the social structure they lived in tried to prevent them, but they transcended it, but they never dreamt of being integrated into the thing that hated them. They pushed back against that with their craft. And it's interesting because, again, Longview genealogies inspired by Arthur Taylor. This young brother, trumpeter in New York, Jeremy Pelt, he has done the same thing for his generation. This is volume 1 of his interviews called Griot. This is Griot Volume 1. If you go on his website, you can order them. He'll send them to yourself and sign them. It says Griot is defined as a member of a class of traveling poets, musicians, and storytellers who maintain a tradition of oral history in parts of West Africa. I'm not going to quibble the point and say I would never use the word griot now. I would use the word jolly, but that's not the point. I love it. I love this. He goes on to say, it is this very concept that inspired trumpeter, composer, band leader, and now author Jeremy Pell to seek out generations of amazing Black storytellers, governance, who are we to each other, of America's indigenous music jazz to record their stories and bring it to the fore. In the first volume, Paul West, Larry Willis, Warren Smith, Bertha Hope, Wynton Marsalis, Peter Washington, Terry Lynn Carrington, Greg Hutchinson, Joe Allen, Robert Glasper, Ambrose Akansiri, rather. So you got volume 1, but he didn't start with volume 1, volume 2. He didn't start with volume 2, volume 3. He didn't start with volume 3, volume 4. He ain't gonna stop with volume 4. These are 4 volumes, right? My point is that the momentum of memory does not reduce what Jeremy Pell is doing, what Arthur Taylor did. They're not reducing themselves to figments of the white imagination to be slotted into this grand narrative that starts with people who held us captive. George Washington is not my dad. If I'd had the courage and the context, I would have cut his throat from ear to ear. Why? Just like you fighting the British, we fighting you, Chief. Muhammad Ali said, you my opposer. You my enemy. I ain't never seen George III, but Mr. Madison, I see your ass every day. Don't be stupid. But these, anyway.
I wanted to sit in that because, you know, it in our souls as Americans, unfortunately, we have people from all over the globe. I was having this discussion yesterday about, well, the Africans know who they are. And I was like, but colonization.
No, they do not.
Yeah, but colonization. They speak English in Ghana and Nigeria. Well, what are we doing?
Man, they got the same hair hats on that Jasmine Crockett got on.
And I said their skin bleaching. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry over there. So and then I was arguing, and I was like, in that moment, we really don't know, Dr. Carr, how deeply woven this, and now it's not even anti-Blackness. It's beyond that, and there's this pull to defend something that was literally created to keep us in bondage. How do we navigate that? How do we navigate that? The desire to want to be in these schools and be accepted and, oh, just like me, pick me, me. Let me be, because I speak eloquently. Watch how I parrot what and it's just, oh, you're so articulate. We take that, oh, you're not like the others. You're not like the others. We wear that. Too many wear that as a badge of honor.
All of us weird.
So how do we navigate that? Because we're sitting here right now, even we're in the season, people have graduated. We were talking last week about, Adjoa and Dr. Black doing that speech that has, shot across the world now.
Like gonna be 500,000 people by the time sun go down today, watched it on that one channel.
Yeah, and we should graduate, we should go to school, we should,
we both did, and we both taught for decades.
Yes.
So yes, absolutely.
But it's a tightrope, because at the same time, what are we teaching? What are we doing?
Well, we know what you have done your entire professional life, and then pass that on to a generation of students.
But that's one. There's pockets of that, but it's not a system.
No,
it's not an institution. Individuals don't beat institutions.
Individuals don't beat institutions.
Which is why, for me, it's like, let's build institutions, because we've started this journey before. It's like we can never get to completion because somebody comes with a check or trauma, or they drop a bomb, and just, I'm just trying to get from here to there, so.
Well, like we were talking about when we did our regular conversation that will lead to the book, My Life in Books, is you pulling this out of me, and we're having these conversations. When I think about the concept, because here I'm surrounded by books. I read. I'm a reader. But reading is a form of listening. It isn't the only form of listening, and it has been privileged in a society where memory has been short-circuited, has been de-emphasized, And where the human organism, eyes, ears, nose, our capacity to listen through everything, because you look at the ancient Egyptian concept of sejim, or to listen, it isn't just the ears. Listening is probably more akin conceptually to experiencing. So when you are moved by a mountain range or a waterfall, or you see an animal, or you smell something delicious cooking, or you see the green in the trees, or you smell a scent of honeysuckle, that's listening. One of the reasons why pleasure, the word in ancient Egyptian, reshwet, one of the ways of experience of naming pleasure, the glyph is a picture of a flared nostril. So,
Mm.
black people been talking about getting their nose open. I mean, this is not something that came out of Ebonics in the short tense. It came from Ebonics all the way back. Reshwet, to experience, means you've taken something in and now it's eliciting a response. Well, human cultures, cultural meaning making, creating institutional formations that enhance that capacity and allow people to do what artists would now call create, that is an awesome responsibility because we are hardwired to experience and to respond. It takes nothing for us to say, sit somewhere and hear boom, 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 doodoo brown, doodoo brown. Like, oh, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do it because you've taken this in and you're responding to that drum. Now, that's the delivery system, the music. That's the delivery system, the cadence. But once you have that, once you've tapped with that delivery system, what you then say, what you then write is going straight to your central nervous system. Drake, Kendrick, Autumn, people call them geniuses. No, I think what they are is people who have understood how to tap into the delivery system, because they can say the exact same things, but if the beat ain't tight, it will be dismissed. And if the beat is tight, you can say damn near anything. And this is the problem. We could say, for example, um, you know, we could say, ignorance ain't good if it don't fit. Oh, ignorance ain't good if it don't fit. No, what we say is just saying, what? Oh, trick. Whoa, wait, what just happened? The delivery system is gonna be there. You know what I'm saying? You could say, if you don't do it right, I'm gonna give you A minus. But you didn't say that, did you? No, you went into some pedophilia stuff. In other words, that's a genius. No, it's the delivery system. We are hardwired to respond to what we receive, what we experience. And I said all that to say we have to restore our capacity to do what Aikwe Arma says in The Eloquence of the Scribes. In this book, he says, my goal is to find the best of what has been said, the best of what has been preserved and passed on. That is why we study. He calls it the eloquence of the scribes. By scribes, he don't mean writers. He means those who preserve memory. By eloquence, he don't just mean the capacity to sound good. It means commingling the delivery system with something worth saying. And so it's very important to understand. And then we trust the delivery system. I'm sorry. We trust our capacity to respond to know the difference. That's why we talk about clean glasses of water. Our bodies are hardwired to receive clean glasses of water. Once they recognize those clean glasses of water, I'll never forget, and I've told this story before, but I'll mention it here in passing. Crick, was it Crick or Watson? It was Crick, who won the, every July 4th. Well, it used to be. Now they've made it into a huge fundraiser and taken it off what they call the most historic 3 miles in the United States, which is in front of the old Pennsylvania State House, Independence Hall in Philadelphia. This is before they built the Constitution Center down there. So this would have been the mid 90s, I think. I went down on July 4th, as I would do when I was in town in Philly, to watch this ritual. And they gave, I think it was Crick. Y'all can look it up. Was it Crick or Watson? One of those discoverers of the thing that's already there. And then they name it DNA. Anyway, and he was saying, thank you for this medal. And, these people are real close to the genetic superior arguments. You look at it's only a couple of little ticks over, and then you get to somebody like what's the white dude that Francis Cress Welsing debated? Somebody will look it up. Skinner. And you see, the whole argument that black people are genetically inferior. Well, how's that possible? We first, you came from us, so we're genetically inferior. What does that make you, an improvement? Don't get cute. Anyway, the point is this. Particularly when we migrated up into them spaces and adapted to the environments which were harsher and really not made for us. So maybe you're better in that space because you had to be, but the best space is where we came from. Ain't that where the species came from? Don't get cute. Don't start that slippery slope on genetics. You might not like where you end up. Best we just say we're all human in the world, because that won't be cute. Actually, y'all been doing this since Montesquieu, the inequality of the races. You've been talking about this since Hegel, talking about Africa had no contribution. I mean, see, y'all real good for dividing the world up into races and putting yourself at top. How about we don't divide into races? But in order to reverse engineer that, we're going to have to recover our long view memory. So again, Crick standing there, or Watson, whichever one it was, y'all can look in the chat, Tim, and would say, he said, thank you for this award. It's recognizing me, but it's recognizing us. He said, awards like this and the advancement of science that we've been trying to do, all of this is like when you go out and exercise. Finally, he says, when you go out and exercise, your body, after an initial moment of soreness and stiffness, but your body gives you these endorphins. It releases these things to say, hey, this means we're going to be around for a little while longer. Keep going. He said, so the rewards of our body, we're hardwired to reward ourselves for things that will extend our lives. Similarly, societies should be investing in people by rewarding them for things that will extend the lives of humanity and society. That's what science should be about. Everybody clapping about. Okay, very nice. I saw it. You got the medalist. Very nice. Now let the black choir sing while I reread Frederick Douglass. They that carried us up off captive required of us a song. And then, it's just what to the slave is the 4th of July. But I mean, I bore witness to that. And I'm saying that in this context to say that when we restore those clean glasses of water, when we do that kind of momentum of memory work, we unblock our memory. And in so doing, we spit out the poison. The poison that would say the Little Rock Nine were there to save democracy. No, y'all get up off our necks. And so when Miss Minnie Jean Brown comes in Thursday before last and embraces me and says, I'm a newbie, and tell everybody I said hello, and I'm going to come in office hours one night and talk about this. I said, thank you, sis. And she says, later on in the conversation that was being had there with all these people present, Miss Minnie Jean is like, let me be very clear about this. Because we talk about the children. I was one of those children. But I want to be clear about what that means. The children are not in charge. We're in charge. Immediately, I thought about W.E.B. Du Bois, who wrote in the wake of the Brown decision, why y'all using our children as battering rams? And if I was to get up again, we talked about this in office hours when we were reading Du Bois's The Education of Black People. I'm looking over my glasses at the quarterly review of higher education among Negroes. I have all those volumes where he published initially Whither, Now, and Why. But earlier in one of the essays, he talks about the idea you're using our children as battering rams exactly for what? Some of you petty bourgeois class aspirations? What about the mass of our children? One of the reasons he got driven out of the NAACP the second time, he's like, look, segregation is here. We need to smash it. But while we are in it, let us make sure that our institutions are as strong as they can be. And here come Gloucester Current and all them and young Roy Wilkins. He's talking about segregation. Shut up, fool. We in segregation. And here we are in 2024. The school's more segregated now than they were in 1954. But we still acting like they not. Don't be stupid. We got to invest in that momentum of memory. So anyway, the listening to them talk, Miss Minnie Jean said, I got something I want to say. Children not in charge. We're in charge. And it's high past time that we do something. This is what she said. Miss Minnie Jean said, there have been generations, as I said last week, of silent witnesses to the things that have been done to our people since 1954 and 1955. We must no longer be silent. And so to me, that means unblocking that momentum of memory. We must speak now with the deep memory. And in speaking with the deep memory, what is revealed is that we have never left the position of we are human in the world, and we don't live for the pleasure, for the vitriol, for the trauma or the treasure of other people. We project into the world, which is why Du Bois, leaving the country, one of his last speeches says, I fought for two things my entire life. The utter elimination of color discrimination and the unblocking of the contribution of African people to modern society as it was to medieval and ancient society. That should be our goal. Full stop. It ain't got no funky flag. I don't care whether you fly it right side up or upside down. Christian soldier, white fascist, fascist soldier. I don't care. I'm talking about, of course, Sam Alito, the Christian soldier, who every day shows you that he ain't gonna stop till he's stopped. Meaning what? The intellectual warfare required to stop a Sam Alito requires full spectrum fighting. It requires the march and the vote. It requires building and strengthening your institutions and infiltrating the other institutions, which brings me to the point that you raised, in Prop, in this sense. We're having this conversation in English because it was shoved into our mouth. Can we use that language? Absolutely, we can. But in using that language, we have to be very clear about what our objectives are. So as I said at the beginning, a couple of minutes ago, I look at everything through the long view lenses. We are the parents of the species. We have had all these experiences, which those experiences are written in our DNA in terms of how human beings move through the world. Everybody on the planet came out of Africa at one point. So I don't care what the shape of your nose is, the color of your skin is, the texture of your hair is, the shape of your eyes are. You came out of Africans. And guess who came out of Africans first? Africans. I'm using that as a label for humanity because that label was then used by those of us who migrated to try to create a hierarchy and make some people better than other people. Was it the only way that happened? No. No. Human experience is rife with examples of trying to other people. But the one that has brought us to this place in this quote unquote modern world system, the one that the narratives will have you believe is the best way humans have ever been in the world and in the history of humanity, which is a narrative. Well, that's the one that has us having this conversation in English, and that's the one that has to be fought back against. We are the parents of the species. We have gone through recent experiences that have been deeply wounding, but the indelible cultural and the indelible spirit of resistance, the thing that is hardwired into every human being to live, has been the delivery system that has allowed us, when recovering the best of what has been thought, the best of what has been said that we can recover, to move forward in time and space. And that means, and when you put that in the context of social structure, and I'll use now social structure very much writ large as a label for the inevitable rise and fall and the rise and receding of social formations generally, then you know that our investment shouldn't be in any particular flag or banking system, any particular voting system. It has to be in our common humanity. And we use those things as tools. We were born into a criminal enterprise. The narrative will tell you this is the greatest experiment in the history of the world. Yeah, that's some damn near, that's some bullshit. But those who want to argue that, let's talk. We got office hours, 2 hours every Monday night in our space in Nubia. And we got 5 days a week and plus more. Then we got this. We can have that. We should have, but don't come with something you were told because you heard it in a song. One day you will discover you crowded up to everybody that, no, to each other that everybody needs some elbow room, elbow room. Made a nice little song for Saturday mornings and Schoolhouse Rock to have the children sing about settler colonialism. There were plenty of fights to win land rights, but the West was meant to be. It was a manifest destiny. The traders, trappers, and the settlers, the politicians and the peddlers, they got there any way they could, any way they could. You know, made heroes out of the people who killed the indigenous people. Oh, hell yeah. I don't care if you soften it up. At the end, you still on top. I don't care if it was John Wayne or Killers of the Flower Moon. At the end of the day, the thing ain't replaced. You can even drop some Negro heroes in as long as settler colonialism goes on. Then you can have Bass Reeves in, lawman, law, the field of violence that is the context for all of this. The rules that apply to everybody except the people in power. Shout out to the Christian soldier, Sam Alito, and the greatest house pet in the history of the Supreme Court of the United States, Clarence Thomas, who yearns for the day, apparently, when his ancestors were out in the field with their shirt off, as if he wouldn't be out there with them. You don't get Jenny if you want to live in the world that you're writing about in the South Carolina case, son. No, Jenny's on the porch. You're in the field. And if you even look that way, they're going to whip your eyeballs out. But somehow you yen for those things. Why? Because the narrative superimposed on you when you was on your knees, doing your rituals in the Catholic Church or the private school that your grandparents sacrificed to make sure you could go to, somehow ensconced so deeply into you a sense of worthlessness that by the time you got the Holy Cross and turned to Malcolm X, you missed what Malcolm was saying. Because then you did a 180 and went right into the arms of everybody from John Danforth to George H.W. Bush, and now you're sitting there, swollen on the bench, blood pumping through them restricted arteries because you can't escape the fact that you're a black man, praying that you can get your friend Donald Trump past the finish line so that you can retire. The Christian soldier may never retire. He may be like that good white nationalist Chief Justice of years ago, John Rehnquist, John Roberts' mentor. And I use the word mentor decidedly, not Jegna, mentor. So maybe he never retires, or maybe both of y'all retire a year after a new Trump presidency. And they go get a bunch of 35-year-old straight Christian soldiers. They may even make one Asian Pacific Islander like this dude that's on the bench in the Fifth Circuit. You better keep your eye on him. But at any rate, the point is this: the narratives imposed on us block our capacity. So, as a teacher, my commitment is to human improvement, to the species. And as an African person, a person labeled African, as someone who looks at things through being a member of the group that's a parent of the species, with centuries and millennia of contributions and momentum of memory that has been arrested by a few short moments of attempted complete evisceration, who understands that the indelible cultural and cultural grounding and spirit of resistance is there, and resilience is there to unblock that and to use the delivery system with the best of what has been said, the best of what has been done, that we can tap into that. I'm not far ahead at all. I'm sitting squarely in the rhythms of African people. And anytime somebody who enters the narrative terrified like Elizabeth, not terrified, but resolute like Elizabeth Eckford or Minnie Jean Brown, anytime they come into space and say, yeah, like a Terrence Roberts, my teachers were better. It reaffirms for me the fact that we've been lied to, hoodwinked, bamboozled, run amok, led astray. We have been, but that we can recover simply by looking in the mirror. I'm about holding up the mirror. I have no permanent enemies, only permanent commitments. And so in that process, in an oppressive system that requires commitment to liberation work, it will ultimately improve life for everybody on the planet, and it requires concentration on those who are most in harm's way. And that's why this week, I want to finish where we were last week. Because last week, we're still in graduation season. Last week, of course, I didn't mention it, last weekend was the anniversary of the killings at Jackson State College. In the moment of talk about Kent State in Ohio, we talk much less and should talk from, particularly in Africana studies frameworks, about the deaths, the state violence, the state killings, the police killings of students at Jackson State College during that same period, South Carolina State and Orangeburg College, now University, both of them in Orangeburg, South Carolina. So we passed that anniversary. I wanted to mention that because, again, that was in the context of these Africans in South Carolina. You talked about Briggs versus Elliott last week. Several people said during the week, y'all didn't talk much about Brown. No, we didn't. Brown was the point of entry, and Brown needs to be all that stuff has to be rewritten. If you want to have a United States of America, and I have absolutely no commitment to anything that grounds any polity in the misery of African people. So if you want to keep a United States of America, you're going to have to renegotiate the terms and reconstruct it from the ground up. And that's fine, because the only people who would disagree with that were the people who want to keep the hierarchy. And those people, baby, enemy, not as a person, as a concept. We're against that. And you can't stand it. That's how you know. That's one of the ways you can tell when something isn't a threat. It's when people embrace it who want to keep you in the hierarchy. Anyway, so it was that moment in South Carolina State. They're looking at the domestic enemy, white supremacy. At Jackson State, they too are looking at the domestic enemy, white supremacy, but they're looking at it in an international context as well, the Vietnam War. And why are you drafting me to send me so they having protests, they come in, they kill them. There's an excellent book, Steeped in the Blood of Racism. I mentioned it when it came out last year, a year before. Steeped in the Blood of Racism, that talks about this, what happened at Jackson State. And so when we left last Saturday, I rushed down to George Washington University because, as we said, our sister, now Dr. Ajwa Batwe Asmoa, received her doctorate. And it was very interesting in the School of Education and Human Development. Her father, her mother, good to see my old comrade, Kwame Batwe Asmoa, who is, of course, from Ghana. Her mother is from Connecticut by way of North Carolina. Pan-Africanists. You got a lot of those relationships, right? Her family, all her sorors, she's a Delta in the senior leadership, Delta Sigma Theta. And, they all came. Her uncle, the adopted uncle, we don't even go by bloodlines no more. Her former ambassador, actually, to the United States from Ghana was there. We all went and sat and had a meal, and just beautiful listening to those stories, talking about baby Ajwa. I love it when you get to embarrass people, their children, right? And you can't send them because your mom and daddy sitting there. Just a beautiful thing. And in the process of that conversation, looking at this beautiful global African family, I'm rushing down there. So right at the time that we finished is when our brother, Daniel Omotosho Black, led in the president of Clark Atlanta University. And they started the ritual of graduation. So I had the ear pod in my ear. I'm sitting at Ajwa's graduation, listening to, in one ear, Dr. Richmond Hill, a brother who's the provost at Northern Virginia Community College, who spoke at their hooding ceremony. Catch a little bit, but I'm listening to the ritual at Clark. And then Dan stood up. And so I had a contrast and comparison I think was very important to do. By the way, I think Bowie State University, the Bulldogs graduate today. Happy graduation to everybody, commencement, all the families. And as I said last week, I'd have been in Atlanta if it hadn't been for Ajwa. But now, having not been there in person, I'm grateful because in the process, again, of experiencing, of listening, of taking it in, I got an insight, I think, that was very valuable. And as we did, everybody in Nubia on Monday night, including processing it with our brother Dan Black, who is streaking across the sky like a meteor right now, because his speech, half of the allotted 30 minutes, only about 15 minutes, a brilliant tapping into the delivery system, the cultural meaning making. And as he said on Monday night, for those of us who were in Nubia, that was his intent, to tap into focusing and grounding these young people, not to get political, because we know that Atlanta was a hotbed last week, and I'm going to talk about that in a second. But in that process, to focus on and ground them, that thing has been received. People are saying this is the best HBCU commencement speech ever. People are saying, why you say HBCU? Why can't it just be the best commencement speech? It can't be the best commencement speech ever, because most of the commencement speeches are not grounded in our common humanity, but in white supremacy. Many of them anyway, including the song. When you hear pomp and circumstance, Howard doesn't use that one. They use Felix Mendelssohn's War March of the Priests. Ba 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 ba. Every time I hear that, I think about the abominable Dr. Phibes. Some of y'all remember that from Vincent Price back in the 70s. Those movies again, Dr. Phibes on the pipe organ going down. He got the skin for the face, the skull face. He covers it up with the mask, So, some people's Vincent Price only goes back to The Thriller. And he said, oh, that's Vincent Price. Yeah, but Vincent Price was called for The Thriller to do The Thriller because of the Vincent Price of the 70s. And at least one of those movies, he's playing on that pipe organ. Da 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 da. Yeah, the War March of the Priests. That's the name of it, not the scribes. Not the scribes, not the eloquence of the scribes, but the War March of the Priests. Now, let's just sit with that for about 60 seconds. War March. Well, what's a war march? Conquering, like Crusades. Conquering, like the Great Commandment. Conquering, the war march, like onward Christian soldiers marching off to war, with the briefs of the Supreme Court going on before. Yeah. Anyway, the war march Of who? The soldiers? No, the priests. Why? Well, if you want to, you can go look at Dune Part 1 or Part 2, or read all of the other volumes that will be turned into movies if y'all crazy enough to go see all them damn movies, which the whole thing is built around religious fanaticism, intolerance, fundamentalism. So they, create a future world thousands of years after these people who came from Earth, and now they looking for a Messiah. And then, all that's in the Dune. You read Frank Herbert's novels, but now they making movies out of it. Why? Because y'all gonna spend your money on it. But anyway, the point is this: War March of the Priests is like a literal stamping of how this Christianity thing unfolded. And for everybody who has ever tugged at a hot ass robe on a hot day in May or June at a commencement or graduation or elementary school or middle school move up, and you tug it at your understand, who you have to thank for it? The medieval priests of Europe. Because the university comes out of the church. The ecclesiastical formations to train priests and those who will go forward. Now, you superimpose that, whether you read James Brunson, Medieval Origins of the Legal Profession, or where's the William Clark, Academic Charisma and the Origins of the Modern Research University. I mean, it's a ton of books, a whole bookshelf of books on that, which are not important. But we got born into that system. So how then do you ground yourself in a form of resilience that doesn't make your whole life existence resistance? In other words, you exist to resist. No, I exist to exist. And I will move those obstacles as I need to move them. But I'm not going to spend my whole life being a figment of your imagination, including how you imagine I should be resisting you when you got your foot on my neck. Get your foot off my neck. So at any rate, in this season of commencement, I'm sitting there listening to the brother at Northern Virginia Community College. And I'm listening to my brother, Daniel Black, along with thousands of people, first in Nubia, in a live watch party that moved Black to tears. And then in a live stream from Clark Atlanta University that soared up over 10,000 people in 24 hours. And then in another channel, HBCU Sports or something like that ripped the video, shrunk it down to Black speech, and then put it out, and it's just garnering tens of thousands, 100,000. Now it's up over 400,000, probably 400,000 now. It's 300 something last I checked, which means it's going to be 500,000 and probably 1 million. Then Black is all over. I saw him on, many of you all saw it, remember saw it on CBS LA. And, Black is explaining what he was trying to do. I'm trying to ground us. We've been doing this for a long time. And then Monday night, we had the incredible conversation about what he was after and what he was trying to do. And this thing is a resonant chord. Again, focusing on who those Africans are. The next day the mummy shows up. He was there the day before. You see the photograph. He's out there with all these Morehouse cats, right? Our brother, senator from Georgia. What's the brother's name? Raphael Warnock. Senator Warnock at the airport with Air Force One, along with Cedric Richmond and all the other alphas, and Morehouse men, who are there to welcome the guy who's going to be a Morehouse man 24 hours from now. Oh, but that Atlanta convergence was brilliant. All the elements of Africana right there in the Atlanta University Center within a 24-hour period, because that Sunday morning was a little different than the rituals of recognition that took place and are taking place among historically Black colleges this season. Howard had the Sandra Brown Duckett. If you don't know who the Sandra Brown Duckett is, she is the CEO president of TIAA. That's who got Professor Hunter and I retirement money. She is a Black woman. It's a brilliant speech she gave, talking about how to save and how to move forward and courage and all this kind of stuff. TIAA, of course, is the Teacher Insurance and Annuity Association, the teachers. Understand? Angela Bassett was at Spelman later the afternoon, Sunday afternoon, after the mummy finished. Talking about these women, tapping into that whole notion of being a woman in the world, a woman of African descent. And of course, we passed a few weeks ago the FAMU debacle in terms of donations, because we need that money. But I mean, we're in that season. Well, Black speech drew together the best of how we see ourselves. It was presented with the delivery system that is unalterably, undeniably African. So a lot of people responding in that, even as there were conversations that we had Monday night in terms of how he's been received and receiving, in terms of ways of knowing. Some people didn't like how he framed the Holy Ghost. Okay, We got to deal with it. In fact, at least he's still talking about the Holy Ghost, right? There's a very new book that just came out by Anthony Penn. Penn has written a number of books. He's at Rice University. He's got a book out now called The Black Practice of Disbelief, a little short book, an introduction to the principles, history, and communities of Black non-believers. I didn't blaspheme there. If you're a non-believer, if you are a believer, I didn't blaspheme either. But Black came right up to the thing when he got the Holy Ghost saying hell no and hell yeah. They got caught up on hell. Reminds me of the line from Dr. Faustus, Christopher Marlowe, when the devil, Mephistopheles, says to Faustus that you're going to go to hell if you're not careful. And Faustus says, I think hell is a fable. Mephistopheles says, I think that till experience change thy mind. But the point is this, so, I mean, you can dream all you want, Clarence, that this is a colorblind society. I think that till experience change thy mind. Jenny can't save you, baby. Because them same people that she helped put a noose up on the National Mall, you look up, you be in that noose. It's not a threat. I hope you die of old age. I hope everybody does. But let's be very clear about it. You didn't see your blood work. I ain't seen your blood work. All I see is your face. And I can tell that's stress, brother. See, I'm a black man. You look at a black man, you praying you can get your master past November. Get back in that seat so you can go take that $1 million RV that your friend gave you, loaned you the money for, and then say you ain't got to pay it back. You know how it worked. Y'all put Miriam Mosby, try to put her in jail for taking $90,000 of her own money. Double that, add $3,000, and that's how much Marjorie Taylor Greene got from people tax money that she ain't had to pay back through PPP. Don't get cute, Clarence. Don't worry, they ain't gonna jam you up, brother. You are adhering to the script as played. But on Sunday, Biden is there to speak. His speech, I think, was an excellent campaign speech. Some people got mad and said he gave a campaign speech. I'm saying, do y'all know how commencement speech works when politicians give them, particularly President of the United States, who usually only gives two, one to one of the military academies and one to another university of their choice? The Chocolate Wonder didn't even give a campaign speech at Howard. When he finally came, he came out in his 8th year. Once. Whatever. I could have done, man. It's fascinating. Everybody come to see. Y'all seen y'all little friend? Look at him. By the way, I'm glad he wasn't put out on the official list of the invitees to the state dinner with William and Rachel Ruto, the President First Lady of Kenya, last week. But he was there. I saw he was listed as somebody who was there, even though he wasn't on the White House official list. Ain't your daddy from Kenya? I guess he was going to be there. But what fascinated me was all the other people who were there too. I mean, I ain't going to start naming people. Y'all can go look it up yourself, the invitee list. It was passingly fascinating. Also, my friend Kazahun Chikole, the publisher of Africa World Press, East African giant publisher, very important publisher. He noted that Ngugi wa Thiong'o was not invited. Ngugi, of course, the great, well, I'm not going to start pulling Ngugi. I'm sure I got some Ngugi up here. But anyway, decolonizing the mind is going to be the one I always keep around here somewhere. It's probably over here somewhere. That's all right. Critic of Kenyan governments because he understands what's at stake. Ruto is the bag man representing U.S. interests in Haiti, going to send 1,000 Kenyan troops, and they're down there now. The contractors, meaning all these people who, they American, you're a communist. These the white companies that are now going to pay themselves your tax dollars and private money to build deployment places and housing for these Kenyan troops and others who are coming into this contingent. Ruto is here, and then they announced they had a joint press conference, and they are saying that, oh well, Biden says, oh, Kenya, we're going to make them a non-NATO, put them in a status higher than they are now in terms of U.S. relations, and move them into a non-NATO ally slot that's higher than even the relationship we have with them now, because he's being a good boy. You're a good boy. Now go bring them Africans over here. We're not going to sully our hands with the Kenyans, but we're going to pay ourselves to give you the equipment and do everything. And then we're going to give you a little nice little overage. You know how that works. Now let's toast. A toast. Of course, Ngugi wasn't there. One of the most important Kenyans, wasn't there. Barack Obama was there, though. But of course, they had these conversations before. But I'm saying I have to say that in the process, Biden had a busy week, starting out with Morehouse, getting this Kenyan thing in line. And then people saying, Biden don't care about us. That wasn't a good speech. It was trash. And he gave a campaign speech. I'm not voting for him. Okay, let me just say this one time, maybe twice, maybe 3 times, maybe 5 times. I don't know. We'll start the one time, see how far I go with it. The politician's not your friend. Okay, once. Politician's not your friend. Okay, let me switch it. I don't care whether Joe Biden like me or not, or whether he like you, or whether you like him. He's a tool. Is he gonna do everything you want? Hell no. But if you're gonna use that as a standard, why ain't y'all fighting the United States of America? Oh, oh, don't get cute. If you want to be uninformed, just say that. If you would rather tune out, then just say that. Because the social structure that we are in is CNN and MSNBC and The View and all that. They putting Leonard McKelvey on television and saying, "What do you think about black politics today?" That should tell you all you need to know about the social structure we're living in. If you want to depend on that social structure to guide how you move through the world, then you done lost your damn mind. But we're going to help you restore it. Why? Because the delivery system is still here, and we can unblock you so that your natural intellect and capacity will take over. You will respond to fresh water, and that's how we solve this. We keep pouring fresh water. We don't get in the dirty water, muddy pool, and say, "Okay, Leonard, could you take a little bit of that dirt out of the water? Still too much grit. Could you take a little bit more out? Wait a minute. Did you pee this? Did you? No, please don't do that. Don't pee in the water. Give me another glass. Let me taste it again. No. And here's all this fresh water all around you. You argue with somebody in a mud pool about whether they peed into the water. Nah, we good. We need you to come up out of that water. But in the meantime, I'm not coming in that water and just drinking it with you. No, I'm gonna drink this clean water and I'm gonna show you where it is. And all them people that's following you into the pool, look. Oh, what? Bro, why don't you come over here with us? Come on in. The water's fine. Joe Biden is not your friend. No politician is your friend. If they're your friend, that's a bonus. But you should not be relying on whether somebody your friend or you like them or not for your political analysis. You have to do something. As Miss Minnie Jean said, be it resolved. Once you have contemplated, once you have thought, once you have experienced and listened and had discussions and arguments, debates, we can agree to agree, as Marie Kelsey would say, and then we resolve to do something. Because as Miss Minnie Jean said, the children are not in charge. We're supposed to be in charge. Too many generations of silent witnesses, not enough active doers. Let's do something. So watching Biden's speech is very interesting. He gave an accounting, and that has been predictably missed in all the chatter in media. Makes the case for re-election, because that's why he was there. To shore up the black vote, as if that's possible. Although I saw Andre Dickens and Keisha Lance Bonds were both at the state dinner. I'm not starting naming people. It's fascinating to see how the people went. Kara Mosley Braun and her significant other was there. I mean, there were Negroes there. It's very interesting. A few entertainers too. Don McLean, I thought he was the singer. Bye bye Miss American Pie. Somebody fact check that for me, whether Don McLean is still alive. Because I'm like, is Don McLean still alive? I see Don McLean, singer, on the state dinner list coming to the Kenya state dinner. I said, did he spend some time in Kenya? Did you write the book of love? Y'all know American Pie, right? Which, as far as I'm concerned, is as good a running delivery system presented narrative of the 60s as anything in white popular music at the time. What does he say? As he go, I forget the lyrics now. The three men I admire most, Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, they caught the last train for the coast. The day the music died. Bye bye, Miss American Pie. Drove my Chevy to the levee, but the levee was dry. There you go. All you black people know, he's 78. Okay, he's still alive. Good, because I don't know how they would have somebody who wasn't still alive eating dinner with the president of Kenya and the first lady on Thursday night. So, okay, very good. So, anyway, point I'm trying to make is that, so these major Atlanta politicians were at the White House for Kenya. Probably some deals that we made coming together. In fact, I saw that they signed a deal at the Atlanta University Center this week. My friend Talitha Washington, who now does the data science stuff at Atlanta University Center, used to be a professor of mathematics at Howard. Talitha leads that initiative, but the president of Howard was there, Ben Vinson. President of Spelman and Morehouse. I hope President Morris Brown was there. I thought I did not see him listed. But because Morris Brown had graduation too. They graduated 57 students. Kirk Franklin was their commencement speaker, which I thought was beautiful. In some ways, I think not always, but in some ways, that little group of graduates from Morris Brown that never closed its doors, lost its accreditation for a minute, regained accreditation with another entity, and is moving forward and continuing now. In some ways, that Morris Brown commencement was to Clark what Clark has become through Dan Black's speech to everybody else. It's black. You don't get no blacker than a commencement in a church with Kirk Franklin speaking. Anyway, the point is that on Sunday, Biden gets up. When Biden takes the stage, my man Sam Livingston. Sam Livingston on the faculty, my big brother Sam Livingston. Sam Livingston, who graduated from the same program that Dr. Black and myself graduated from in African Studies at Temple when it was the only PhD in the world. Sam, at Morehouse, the faculty sit behind the president, as I talked about last week. And if you watch Biden's speech, Sam is sitting, there's President of the United States, then a row of people, then Sam. So Sam is maybe 3 feet, 4 feet behind the president. It's more snipers than you got anywhere else. It's every kind of security. The dogs talking in they paws. Okay, 6 o'clock, we got the president in dog speak, whatever. Everybody wired, right? Everybody looking, and you got students from the AUC and other students who are protesting outside the commencement. Some professors have joined them who don't even come into commencement. This is the tricky part of an HBCU moment. You got the New York Times writing a trash article talking about, HBCU students are more concerned with domestic politics than foreign policy, opening their collective media mouth and putting their collective media brain on display. So tiny. You don't know nothing about the history of HBCUs if that's what you think. But I know something else you don't know about. You don't know about Big Mom and them that come from Memphis for graduation at Morehouse, and damn it, it's going to be a graduation. If somebody tear this graduation up, you ain't got to worry about the Secret Service. I'm going to get my green switch and discipline everybody in here that's going to shut this down. The president ain't got to worry about canceling, because this is what David Thomas, President of Morehouse, said. I'll shut graduation. I'll shut commencement down. Okay. So these brilliant people, students, faculty at Morehouse, the valedictorian, Fletcher D'Angelo gets up, and in his speech, he calls for a permanent ceasefire, immediate and permanent ceasefire. Who's clapping? The mummy behind him. You gotta clap. You couldn't stop this? No, I can't stop it. You can't stop this? No, I can't stop it. You can't stop this? I can't stop it because I didn't start it. In other words, the president of Morehouse sitting there on a carved wooden chair with all kind of West African symbols in it, and East African and Pan-African, including ancient Egyptian, because Asa Grant Hilliard III, Bafor Amankwatiya II, consulted on the construction of that throne. Ask Lawrence Carter, the dean of Morehouse Chapel, for decades. You see the feather of Ma'at in the headband of the woman who is in the throne that the president of Morehouse is sitting on, in the chair, not the throne, the chair. President of the United States, 2 seats down, and behind him, Sam Livingston, who walked in, marched in the processional faculty with the flag of the Democratic Republic of Congo draped around his neck. Biden comes in. When they stand up, from the moment he stood up, Sam takes that flag off, and one of his colleagues holds that flag up. You know how many snipers were down there? He's within spitting distance of the President of the United States. That took a courage that I'm not sure many of us have. Big brother Sam, I ain't mad at you, brother. And while he was doing that, then the president gets up to make his speech. Sam stands up, him and his colleague, they hold the flag up the whole time. Why is he holding that flag up? I encourage everyone to get a book that has recently been translated into English. In fact, just got translated into English. This is Jean-Pierre Mbelu's book, The Case for the Congo. It's a cheap little book, $20 book. Case for the Congo. The fight against U.S. imperialism, U.S. imperialist system, the battle for Pan-African Renaissance, forward by Kambale Musavulu, written by Jean-Pierre Mbelu. Jean-Pierre Mbelu, political analyst, trained philosopher. This little book will tell you everything you need to know to get a beginner's grip on why the Congo is important. My man saying, connecting the Congo to Cop City. connecting Palestine, many students with the Kefias on there. And then while that was going on, while he's speaking, while Biden is speaking, making his political campaign in domestic policy a better choice than this straight fascist who was in the Bronx this week, Donald Trump, and his own his employees like Byron Donalds, who apparently some worm crawled in Florida, son, and ate his mind out. He out there saying this is the best thing that could happen to us. You know, he with Tim Scott and the rest of them. God bless that brother. God bless him. Ajwa can talk to him. I just nod and keep going. But the point is this. Well, I keep Ajwa off him this time I see them together because Ajwa, she put the fire on you. But anyway, the point is that he's a better choice. This ain't. Let's be very clear. So, the Friends of the Congo, Maurice Carney and them, Sam, like I talked about last week, that's before Sam did what he did. They stand up there with this thing, with this place behind him, this flag, right there as president. So he's giving a speech. You can't get no angle without the Congo flag there. And while that's going on stage, in the audience, Professor Taylor puts her fists up, turns her back to the president of the United States, got her keffiyeh on, and you can see the journalists who get the right shot. They got Professor Tara Taylor, with her fist up to the back, and then you see in the office, you see the president of the United States, and behind him, you see the Congolese flag. They did not coordinate. That's resistance. All this happening in Atlanta at the same time, from Dan Black to Sam Livingston and Tara Taylor and Fletcher D'Angelo. Monday morning, Sam Torah are on Democracy Now!, Amy Goodman. So I encourage y'all to look about this so you can get to connect. There's a history to African movements on these campuses. In fact, Fisk University, Atlanta University system, among the many participants in the first, and today is the day, Saturday, May 25th, this is the anniversary of 1972's first African Liberation Day. Pan-Africanism, global solidarity. Black colleges. The first one was here in D.C. Howard University participated in students. If you read Abdullah Kalamat's recent book, Dialectics of Liberation, the African Liberation Support Movement, you see what that say? That's a Raleigh, North Carolina. Y'all know where Raleigh, North Carolina is. You know what's in Raleigh, North Carolina as well. North Carolina Central, New York Times, do a little bit, just a little research. Or better yet, who cares? As a New York Times subscriber and former paperboy, I can tell you that I do not look to the New York Times to give me my worldview. I look to it to give me a running tally of what you think is important in the social structure. Same thing with the Financial Times. In fact, today, since we're kind of winding this up today, top UN court orders Israel to end offensive and allow aid into Rafah, right? Also elections coming up. UK election countdown begins. Also elections in Mexico. So pay attention to that. I think the election day is actually June the 1st. When we meet again, they will be having their elections. Claudia Sheinbaum, the name may throw you off. Her people were involved in the 1968 student movements and protests in Mexico. She's the leading candidate to replace Lopez Obrador, who is limited by term limits from running again. She may be even more left than he is, which will be very interesting. Mexican elections are this week. Modi is nervous in India, by the way. He'll win, but you're going to let all these opposition people run. Meanwhile, the greatest friend of the United States in East Africa, some people would say on the whole African continent, who plays as a reformer and is revolutionary, but in many ways is suppressing everybody. Of course, that would be Paul Kagame in Rwanda, who has a serious hand and troops on the ground in Congo. They're saying whether or not they're going to allow his opposition to run, or is he going to jail them, or, there's been allegations of people being killed. In fact, Mexican candidates are disappearing. A lot of them local elected officials or people running for office because the drug cartels are trying to off local politicians. Meanwhile, you got people in the United States, but they ain't going to vote. And yes, thank you. It's important for us to understand that all of this death is connected. And it is very interesting, isn't it? Prof, you mentioned something. Please come back for a second and say something about that, because I was going to kind of probably end with that, but I think it's good at this juncture that we bring this in right now, because it does speak to this general theme as we're talking about this question of how we connect memory, to illustrate how often our memory is so short term that we don't remember yesterday, much less 4 years ago.
Yeah, 4 years ago today, a man went into a store, allegedly handed a counterfeit bill to the store owner, who called the police. And what transpired after that will, I think, forever be remembered, but maybe not. George Floyd called for his mother and took his last breath on this day 4 years ago, George Perry Floyd Jr. And you've talked about him so powerfully through the lens of Juneteenth and Texas, and we got to learn so much about this man, Minnesota, and that thread and that great migration into that space of his family and the high school that he attended, and becoming kind of this seminal rallying figure during the pandemic to talk about how our life is not valued, how somebody could cavalierly have their knee on somebody's neck with their hands in their pocket as people are shouting for them to stop, and the paramedics didn't even come in and do what they were paid to do, which is to preserve life.
Mhm.
It's a wild thing to live in a country such as this,
It is.
and to be required to love it at the same time, understand that there's something fundamentally wrong with how human beings are treated, that folk who are unhoused or who are being shredded at the borders through
Mhm.
barbed wire or razor wire,
Mm.
being treated less than human. It's weird, and it gets back to the question that I'm asking: our responsibility to require more, um, to demand more, to look in the mirror and know more. You know, yeah, just
No, it's good. We pause in that. We raised George Floyd, his mother, his family. As you say, the line in North Carolina that extends into Texas, into the Maud Cooney Hair Homes. We talked about her, even the place he grew up, his mother brought them into, named for a cultural medium maker. Very important. That family, Cooney family. And Jack Yates, John Henry Yates, coming out of enslavement with his friends and comrades who also formerly enslaved, bought that first piece of land that became Emancipation Square, where they had the first Juneteenth in Houston. Of course, the high school that George Floyd went to, named for Jack Yates, John Henry Yates. Of course, that's Martin's alma too. That's the place where this punk head of the Houston Independent School District, Mike Miles, went in after the black woman who was the principal and eventually got her sent in there by the shovel mouth bastard governor of Texas, Greg Abbott. Elections don't matter. Don't do that. Jack Yates spinning his grave. Of course, that same Emancipation Square, right off Emancipation Street across the street, was the dental office of Felicia and Debbie Allen. I'm sorry,
their
Ayers.
father.
Ayers, right. And of course, her mother's still alive. Her father was a dentist. Her mother's still here in centenarian. And so this is not ancient history. And as you say, moving to Minnesota, looking for a better life, and then be intervened by the state. And of course, this isn't a matter of facts or not facts, because you got people to this day said, oh no, that police officer did not kneel on George Floyd's neck. If you look at social media, oh yeah, they say, oh yeah. Of course, you can't argue with people. And in a city with so many from Texas, from Mississippi, like people don't think about Minnesota in that context, but one of the earliest Juneteenth celebrations outside of the South is in Minnesota, Minneapolis, Rochester, Minnesota, where Angie Porter is from, where they've been celebrating her, although she was born in Texas, San Antonio. So again, that Texas Minnesota link is very important.
Why
But
why would someone wanna deny that, right? So, this time next week when we are convening, it will be in the midst of the anniversary of the decimation of Black Wall Street,
mm-hmm,
right? Mother Fletcher's still alive, right? She
mm-hmm,
turned 110. She's turned 110 this month,
mm-hmm.
on May 5th. As we are May 10th, as we are, navigating this, people did not even teach that in the high school. Like this, that whole history was erased. I had Demario Solomon Simmons in the
Yes,
studio with me on Monday, and he was
yes,
like, he went to school and he's arguing. He got to college arguing with a professor about, oh, that didn't happen. I grew up in Greenwood. We never talked about that. They never talked about it.
that's right.
George Floyd, they're going to deny something that we see with our own eyes. Rodney King, not
That's right.
guilty. We watched that with our own eyes. So it's a weird thing to be Black in America and have people gaslight you so vociferously
Mm.
around facts that we know to be true. And then
But
just
by
want to
weird,
erase.
you mean weird by an objective, conventional standard of human interaction, but
Yeah.
not weird by American history at all. In fact, it
No.
fits perfectly with American history. It's not weird at all, which is why the idea of having fidelity to or love for a country, patriotism, this whole question is really deeply seated in this Western kind of patriarchal notion. To fall in love with a settler state, they want the Native Americans to love America. How absurd is that?
And many do.
Well, they love it because it's their country first. And then, like the veterans always tell me, the indigenous veterans, I say, like I told you before, I was in the Museum of the American Indian years ago. I'm sitting here, they had a Veterans Day thing, and I'm asking the indigenous brother, I'm like, man, so help me explain to me this relationship between the indigenous people, the nations of indigenous this continent, and the military. He said, it's very simple, brother. I put this uniform on with this flag, and they give me a gun. And I could defend my land, because before they took it from us, it was ours. So the way I get to fix it, if somebody attacked this country, that means they're going to attack where I lived before you was here. So that's all you had to say to me, brother. So the idea then of relationships, and people say, well, if you don't love America, why don't you leave it? My people didn't ask to come, fool. And your people are here and able to be or do whatever they do because my people and these indigenous people were harnessed to an engine of empire that allows you to have a standard of living at the expense of other people around the world. The phone you talk on, the computer you type on, the one we're talking about now, based on oppressive relationships with other people, other places, and you say it's the greatest country in the world, it certainly is the most oppressive. And when we get to July 4th, we know Freddie Douglass said you lay it end to end. And when you see in terms of brutality, America reigns without a rival. Say, but he didn't leave. No. Am I going to leave? The door is open on that because I live in the world, not in the damn United States of America alone. And at the bottom line of it is this: I have a passport and I got a voter registration card. I was born here. So if citizenship means anything, until we can get rid of even that as a notion of how you can define somebody's relationship on where they were born, until we move against the idea of inequality based on where you came out of your mother's womb, this deep notion of nativism and nationalism, I'm going to test the assumptions of this. Because we all know the First Amendment, the Constitution don't mean nothing. It means nothing, but it has to be maintained as an illusion, because otherwise people will start committing to things bigger than a flag and a passport. And that's what a system that keeps people oppressed can never allow to happen. So when Clarence Thomas this week and Thomas Alexander, in his official capacity as president of the South Carolina Senate versus the South Carolina State Conference of the NAACP, Alexander versus South Carolina NAACP case, writes his concurrence, where he talks about Brown versus Board of Education, Clarence Thomas conveniently leaves some things out. And I think this may be a good place for us as we kind of turn to close today to think about in terms of this idea of us doing something, that we have to resolve to do something. Our actions have to be informed by being aware. And for Brother DeMario Simmons to say that he didn't learn this in school is incredibly consistent. Of course he didn't learn it in school. You didn't learn it in the black school. But, and there are critics who say, well, Black Wall Street isn't evidence of black progress. Of course, that's silly. It isn't evidence of complete community progress, because some of the things that were sourced in the black towns of Oklahoma made their way to the Greenwood district to be sold at so-called Black Wall Street. Was there class inequality? Of course. Was there class stratification? Of course. As we talked about many times, as I talked about last week. In many ways, what desegregation did was allow the forestalled class stratification in black communities in the United States to accelerate, so that some people among the black quote unquote elite could escape the rest of the black people, the black masses. And that got brought up in the conversation we had at the law school last week with the little Rod Nine brother from Dunbar High School. As I said, he said, people fighting in there, and I connected to what Terrence Roberts was saying. They were fighting back in the segregated days too. But now with desegregation, you can get a few of these people who can escape the physical proximity, the apartheid of being lumped with the rest of the black people, and they do what petty bourgeois do and bourgeois do all over the world as Continental Africans. In fact, on June the 1st, this week, Brother Adesoje, who are you probably in the chat about Adesoje, I hope you dropped the link for the information. We're going to be having a conversation, Caddy Adams, Aya Nelly, and Adesoje around this book that, what did I do with The Resolutionaries, This book by Ayikwe Arma, The Revolutionaries, who we talked about many times, this big old book by the great Ayikwe Arma, still in Senegal, son of Ghana, who talks about the idea that you got professional classes of black people. In that case, it's translators around the African continent who go from conference to conference to conference, make a nice living, have per diem, have hotel and flights, get their money, and their job is to sit at these conferences with these African leaders who are meeting with these white companies and people like President of the United States, Joe Biden, and them, big corporations, which is the power behind the throne, about how to make progress in Africa. But they never make progress. But those elites, they get to attend, translate, get their money, and the people who are really keeping their foot on African people get what they want, the natural resources. And at one point in the book, they get a continental African who has developed this theory that basically says, colonialism and slavery and all that stuff was good because it pulled us out and it allowed us to create an intellectual vanguard, and we can now assume the role to help Africa. That's a lot of continental African leaders. See it in the Caribbean, see it in Latin America, see it in the United States. And that forestalled of those class cleavages that kind of got forestalled because everybody was trapped behind the apartheid system. Desegregation allows some of them people to escape. Now, the trick here in the United States is, of course, that those people who escape, many of them will turn around to the rest of the people and say, oh, pull up your pants and be like me. What? Okay, I want to be like you. Why don't you come teach here? Why don't you? No, hell no. I ain't gonna do that. I'll get on TV and tell white people that I told you to be like me. Right? In fact, I'll get the delivery system down, get my little jaunt and talk a little bit, get up here, my wife, and it's very nice. And then I'll be president of the United States. But I'm going to come down and tell you, pull your pants up. You pull your pants up. In fact, your granddaddy, Odhiambo, in Kenya, he got laughed at when he showed up in the village with a pair of pants. Now, what the hell you got on? You look like a white man. Ha, 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 ha. Who knew one day that his grandson would be telling black men in Chicago to pull their pants up? Anyway, point is this. Long memory gives you a different perspective. Love? No. Cameron acting crazy on CNN. But I seem to remember years ago in the song Paint the White House Black, a line that was like, this country got us on cracking pipes, stars and stripes, putting the couplets together. And I'm like, yeah, the red for the stripes and white for the stripes. I'm good. I'm good on the stars and stripes forever. My daddy was a veteran, got one of them triangles that they give you at the funeral. My mama had that on the mantle to the day she made transition. That's a great thing. But no, he wasn't in the army because he wanted to be. He was in the army along with three of his brothers because they drafted him in the 1940s. So the whole point is, whether it be a literal draft or economic draft, you serve, so to speak. Even the language of service. Are you service? Are you serving? Or are you a servant? It's a different kind of concept. But anyway, I'm going to bring this to a close. When you read Alexander versus South Carolina NAACP, what we saw, I should probably put a bow on the Atlanta thing where I wanted to, end up with that. That Atlanta convergence reminded us that there's no one way to be in the world. The governance conversation that Dan Black led from the stage at Clark Atlanta's commencement, tapping into the delivery system of cultural meaning making. And as he said on Monday night, really wasn't emphasizing the momentum of memory that we look at when we look at the category of movement and memory. Movement and memory was absolutely there. It was foregrounded there. He talked about a lot of the great faculty who had come through Clark Atlanta. And of course, before there was a Clark Atlanta, there was a Clark College and Atlanta University. And we know Atlanta University is where Du Bois was, W.E.B. Du Bois. So that momentum, but it's emptied, and he used the delivery system of here they come, y'all. And here they do come. They come from the beginning of humanity, as he kind of gestured toward in his speech. See, that's the part I think that people who get caught up in the delivery system missed. Because some of what was delivered was that unbroken long view genealogy. But again, people look at from being from the boat, in the 300 or 400 years we've been in this specific moment, as if that's our point of departure. If you start, as John Clark said, if you start your history with slavery, everything since then looks like progress. That should be rejected categorically, as young people say, period. Anyway, the point is that grounding, we saw that on display. We also saw the fierce rejection of social structure politics that is killing people around the world, whether it be the Palestinians or the Congolese, whether it be the people who are being trained up now to attack people if you need to deploy them in places like Baltimore and Atlanta with cop cities. And again, it's very interesting to see because Biden making his case, talking about all these political appointments. And I think at this point now, there are 58 judges of African descent, 2/3 of them women, who have been appointed to the federal bench in the Biden-Harris administration. One of them, Lydia Grigsby, is the first woman of African descent to be appointed to the federal bench at the district court level in the state of Maryland. Grigsby, why do I know that name? Oh, right. She was the one presiding over the case that Marilyn Mosby was in. Now, did it matter that one black woman told another black woman, okay, time served, we're going to put you on probation, house supervision? Oh, I don't know. Maybe it did, maybe it didn't. And Marilyn Mosby don't come with clean skirts. It took the family of Keith Davis Jr. like 7 years to get exonerated for a crime he did not commit. Mosby's on the side of the police, but guess what? You got to almost, in her mind, Tuskegee grad, Marilyn Mosby, by the way, you got to be, her parents was police. So, like Ketanji Onyeka Brown Jackson's parents, educators. Well, Marilyn Mosby's family was police. She come from police. So now I'm a police too. And guess what? I'm not prosecuting low-level crimes. In this case of what happened with Keith Davis Jr., that was indefensible in the wake of the death of Freddie Gray. She charged those cops and Freddie Gray, couldn't get a conviction, then decided to drop the rest of the charges. Critics would say she shouldn't have dropped them. I would say you shouldn't have dropped them. But at the same time, that doesn't matter. If you do anything other than attack black people, even if you clear your throat and say, hold on, no, we're going to intervene. We're going to have some, redirection programs. I'm going to deal with community policing. We got to change the culture of this office. Guess what? Marilyn Mosby, whether she was always right or wrong, which of course is neither of those, but it didn't matter. In that social structure, she became a target, an enemy of the unconstrained force of the state against our people. So if you think for a minute that wasn't a political prosecution and persecution, then you're not paying attention. But that judge, who was pretty rough at moments, but Lydia Grigsby, first black woman on the district court, federal court in Maryland, appointed by the Biden administration. He made that, he's talking about all the appointees. People not listening to that though, because on Saturday you saw Black do what he did. On Sunday you saw Sam do what he did, and you saw this on display in Atlanta. You saw it all in terms of our commitments. You saw the convergence of our commitments, the convergence of how we negotiate a social structure, how we grant ourselves in the governance formation, our cultural meaning making, our ways of knowing, which is why HBCU commencements are a little different, because we're trying to stay together as a group. And as I talked about last week, and I would encourage people to go back if you missed it, talking about the whole idea of creating a we in a moment that was intervened by desegregation, because U.S. foreign policy and domestic policy interests converge. And what Clarence Thomas, who probably didn't get the memo, he seemed to miss the fact in the Alexander versus South Carolina NAACP that the Brown decision had as much or more to do with foreign policy as it did domestic policy. The decision was 9-0, that separate but equal should not have a place in American life. Now, of course, it does have a place. It still has a place, and it was never equal. And we didn't ask to be sacrificial lambs, if you talk to Little Rock 9. But I want to end today now with just a moment on this Supreme Court case. The Supreme Court case of Alexander versus South Carolina NAACP. If you read Elena Kagan's dissent, she kind of gives a nice summary. And I'll just give you the first paragraph. This voting case, as the court acknowledges, turns on a quintessential factual dispute. Here's the issue in South Carolina. Did South Carolina rely on racial data to reconfigure the state's congressional district number 1? We know they did, but Alito invents some shit to make it seem like they didn't. And I think it's important for us to deal with that. By the way, South Carolina, which census numbers, I know they undercount Black people, but it's at least 25% Black by the U.S. Census, at least a quarter Black. And the Black population trends younger. There are 7 congressional seats in U.S. House of Representative seats in South Carolina. 6 of them are held by white nationalist party. the so-called Republican Party, the white nationalist party. District 1 is the party of the brilliant stateswoman and just brilliant legislator Nancy Mace. This Nancy Mace district we talking about. She won by 1% of the vote last time. There are 762,713 people who live in her district, which encompasses most of Charleston. People talking about, you want Nancy Grace out, register to vote and get her out. You can take that scarlet A and, now you can say absent from the federal legislature. But she won that election. So, of course, the white nationalists in South Carolina, realizing that whiteness is dying, trying to shore up her district. And that, combined with voter suppression and black apathy, shout out to another son of South Carolina. I think Lenore McKelvey people got roots. He got roots in South Carolina, doesn't he? Shame your state, don't you, son? Anyway, but that's all right. Mike Harriet has handled Lenore on many occasions, and I'm sure we'll do it again. But the possibility of getting rid of her was made harder by the fact that these white boys moved 30,000 Africans out of Congressional District 1, and that all the lower courts found that it was based on race. In fact, let me just read Kagan. This voting case, as the court acknowledges, turns on a quintessential factual dispute. Did South Carolina rely on racial data to reconfigure the state's Congressional District 1? The parties here agree that the South Carolina legislature wanted to make District 1 more Republican. They further agreed that in pursuit of that aim, the legislature moved nearly 200,000 people into or out of the district. What the parties disagree about is how the people expelled from the district were chosen. The state contends that its map makers looked exclusively at data from the last election and targeted people who had voted Democratic. If that is true, the state's actions, however unsavory and undemocratic, are immune from federal constitutional challenge. Pause. It is not written in the U.S. Constitution that you can't challenge redistricting at the state level based on party politics. It's not written in the Constitution. It has been interpreted by courts, particularly the United States Supreme Court, that issues of political gerrymander are non-justiciable, meaning what? You can't bring them before the court. That could change because race and politics are so deeply commingled in this country that if you see a D or an R, if this was 1870s and you saw R, it would be black people voting that way. If you see it in the 1990s and you see a D or R, if it's a D, it's going to be black people over there. Because we made political choices based on our best interests. Republicans say, well, we're the ones who ended slavery. Shut up, fool. All them people is not in your party no more. They left in the 50s and 60s. You think we stupid? Actually, you do think we stupid. Why? Because you got people on Breakfast Club and rappers that you interviewing for something because you know that they can be counted upon to say something stupid and keep us out of politics if we listen to them. So, at any rate, she goes on and says, the challengers, though, offer a different account. They say that the map makers, not content with what the election data revealed, also reviewed and heavily relied on racial data, thus exploiting the well-known correlation, as I just said, between race and voting behavior. And if that claim is true, the challengers have a good constitutional claim because the Equal Protection Clause forbids basing election districts mainly on race in order to achieve partisan aims. So the key question again, I'll end with this, for Kagan, says, in drawing District 1, did the mapmaker consider voting data alone, or did they also closely attend and respond to which residents were black and which were white? She then goes on to really lay out the fact. Let me just a very quick point of statutory interpretation, judicial review, and how this thing works in terms of what you can and can't reverse. Appeals courts not supposed to enter into extensive conversation about the facts of a case. They are not supposed to review what the lower courts did and retry the case in terms of the facts. They are supposed to look at cases that have been appealed and only reverse if there's reversible error. Reversible errors of law, maybe material fact. But in this case, they should never have looked with a fine precision. Well, I ain't gonna say that. That's a lie. They should never have retried the case by looking through all the facts and making and substituting their judgment, Supreme Court judgment, with the lower courts, including the Court of Appeals, which upheld it. In other words, no, this was a racial gerrymander. And Kagan goes through all the evidence that all of these uh, triers of fact had to review. It's very clear they used race to move these 30,000 black people out of them 200,000 out so they could get them, maybe put them in the Jim Clyburn's district or whatever. Y'all got one seat that black people can have, even though it's a quarter black of South Carolina, probably more. And we're going to protect Nancy Mace ignorant ass so she can sit up in here with Marsha Blackburn in the Senate side and Marjorie Taylor Greene and the Colorado girl, girl. And they can just be crazy together and get big head Matt Gaetz, who had hundreds of thousands of dollars in PP loans forgiven. And that ain't even the most. One person had $2.3 million in loans. Y'all after Marilyn Mosby for $90,000 of her own money. And in the case, the prosecutor, Maloney, says, well, yes, it was her money, but while it was being held in Maryland by Baltimore, it's part of the public trust. Oh, and that PPP money ain't part of the public trust? Get the hell out of here. Ambitious ass. You cool. It's all right. No problem. No problem. But the point is this. Alito, the Christian soldier writing for the majority, not only engages in this parsing of material fact with, crazily enough, the assumption that the legislature was acting in good faith to begin with. In a racist ass South Carolina, how you going to assume that? Oh, because you a racist. Got you. Loving that pine tree, man, the George Washington flag. That's nice. What about the upside down one you got at your crib? Oh, your wife did that, huh? Just a model of courage. Meanwhile, Sam Livingston standing up behind the president of the United States with snipers doing all over the place, hold up the Congo flag. Y'all don't know nothing about courage, Sam. Sammy Sam, Sam. You ain't going to retire. He'll probably be in the middle of writing an opinion and die. Because just like William Rehnquist. Now, Clarence, he might want to ride around his RV with his whole ass insurrectionist wife. But I mean, that's a whole nother thing. That's if Trump wins. Oh, but elections don't matter. Ask people in South Carolina, because when Alito wrote the opinion, they went back through the facts, left out conveniently all the stuff Kagan talking about and said, no, this wasn't racial, it was political. Then he says, and plus, how are you going to substitute it? What map would you use? Right? Who has the power to do that? And so they insert their opinion, and this is all of them. This is Beer Kavanaugh. This is Justice McGonnell Gorsuch. This is The Handmaid. This is Amy Coney Barrett. In addition to John Balls and Strikes Roberts, Sam Alito, they ready. Clarence Thomas agrees, but he writes separately. And let's just look at Clarence Thomas here. Clarence Thomas writing separately for himself as a concurrence that nobody else joins. It's not enough that he done hung around long enough to now be in the majority. He and Alito trying to run a straight Boston now. And if you let them get away with this, all the laws that are being passed that they had teed up to begin with and just waiting for the Supreme Court to get the number they wanted so they could just do it in Louisiana this week. The idea that if you have a pill that can terminate a pregnancy, they now saying that that's a controlled substance and you can go to jail or be fined thousands of dollars if they find you with an abortion pill in Louisiana. You think that law is not going to be upheld at the Supreme Court? You're living in a fantasy world. Oh no, but the elections don't matter. Come on. Anyway, this is what, and we're going to end with this with CT. Yeah, oh yeah, that's right, Jelani. Voting Rights Act. Now, interesting enough, this case does not evoke the Voting Rights Act. They didn't use the Voting Rights Act. They went straight to the Constitution, 14th Amendment. Very interesting, because remember, they tried to eviscerate the Voting Rights Act. In fact, Clarence Thomas begins his concurrence by saying this doesn't evoke the Voting Rights Act. But this is what he says about Brown. You probably heard all of this in fact, let me go to the beginning of the concurrence, because I want to give you just a little flavor of how this self-hating Negro is dealing. He says, I join all but parts 3C of the court's opinion. The court correctly concludes that the judgment below must be reversed under our precedents. That's a lie. Although I find the analysis in part 3C persuasive, clear error review is not an invitation for the court to shift through volumes of facts and argue its interpretation of these facts. Watch this. He was right. There was no clear error. There was no reversible error then if there's no clear error. In other words, you can't reverse a lower court simply because you don't like how they interpreted the facts. Was there error of law? Was there a clear error? No. Then you can't reverse it, except that's exactly what this court did. People talking about the law. The law only exists through our capacity to intervene and make sure. The Brown decision was less about the law and more about the politics of the time, which is where Clarence Thomas is going with this when we end with this. He goes on, the court searching review of the expert reports exceeds the proper scope of clear error review. He's right about that. Why are you going back over the reports? You weren't the lower court. Leave it alone. But this is where it turns. He says, but that analysis is not necessary to resolve the case. So you see what he said? This case turned for Alito and them on, oh, y'all made material errors a fact. And then, okay. Clarence like, no, you shouldn't even looked at that. What is this boy getting ready to do? You're saying that the way they decided this case didn't need to be decided that way and they shouldn't even have done it? Clarence is like, let's keep going. He says, in part 3B, the court explains that the district court failed to evaluate evidence reflecting the correlation between race and politics with the necessary presumption of legislative good faith. And in part 3D, it explains that the district court failed to properly account for the plaintiff's failure to produce an alternative map. Both of those mistakes are reversible legal errors. So he agrees with that. Where you gonna get a map from? Or, you didn't properly evaluate the relationship between race and politics because Alito creates the fantasy as if somehow what they did, which the expert witnesses showed was demonstrably because of race to move those 30,000 out in Charleston to help Nancy. Alito said, nah, that was political. And then bases it on so weak an argument. I encourage anybody who wants to read it, read Kagan's dissent, because she eviscerates him. But guess what? They got the numbers now. They running to Boston. Law be damned, Preston be damned. And here's where Clarence Thomas comes up. He says, I write separately to address whether our voting rights precedents are faithful to the Constitution. I swear, I think Clarence Thomas thinks that if he had a time machine and went back to 1787, he would get out of the machine and be Snow White. This fool, are you serious? Faithful to our Constitution? Now, what people have got caught up, what you see in the news headlines over the last couple of days, is that he took a swipe at Brown. Let's just go 24 pages into his concurrence to get to the point. He says, the view of equity required to justify a judicial map drawing power emerged only in the 1950s. Pause. By equity, he means the view of the capacity of a court to intervene. Judicial equity, the ability of a court to intervene and the authorizing legal power to allow them to intervene. He says the court's impatience with the pace of desegregation, quote unquote, caused by resistance to Brown versus Board of Education, quote, led us to approve extraordinary remedial measures, end quote. Thomas continues, in the follow-on case to Brown, the court considered, quote, the manner in which the relief was to be accorded, end quote, for vindication of the fundamental principle that racial discrimination in public education is unconstitutional. So in other words, Brown won 1954, separate but equal has no place in American life. The Russians, the Chinese, you're making overtures to all the African countries, the Caribbean countries taking their independence, and the American Negro here getting beat up, milkshakes poured on her head, punched in the face, all this kind of thing. And so here come the United States. Hey, we want to be your friend. Kwame Nkrumah was like, back up, chief. I went to school in the United States. I know y'all hate black people. Shit, we got to do something. Brown, using our children as a battering ram. Desegregation. Okay. Hey, world. Y'all shouldn't, hey, well, you don't go Nigeria, don't go with them, go with us. Look, we love black people. We love black people. Yeah, except nobody got the memo in the hillbilly horde, particularly in the South. So they spitting on people, Jerry Jones in Arkansas. They spitting on people, all the people stopping Charmaine Hunter Galton Hamilton Holmes from coming to the University of Georgia. They spitting on people, Arthurine Lucy at the University of Alabama. They spitting on people. They striking people in the back of the head. James Meredith, the Ole Miss. Hey, they spitting on people. Elizabeth Eckert said, yeah, me and my sister were seamstresses, so I put straight pins all in my shit. So when you hit me, you blew back a bloody white fist. Now I got a little color. But then they hit me from behind. So the United States want to tell the world we're better, but the hillbilly horde didn't get the memo. By the way, there's a whole northern side to that too. We have to talk about another day. But the point is this. That political directive, then they got to come back in 1955, say all deliberate speed, and still take them 10 years to get little traces of integration. Clarence Thomas, however, takes this point, loyal and faithful servant, who apparently would love the field because he wants to know what his masters was thinking in 1787. But he don't want you to talk about your ancestors, but he want to talk about somebody else's ancestors who he thinks are his ancestors. But then again, I don't know. Clarence Thomas is pretty turned around. This is what he says. He says basically the United States Supreme Court, the federal court, did not have the power to impose the remedy it imposed or tried to impose in Brown versus Board of Education 54 or 55. He writes here, in doing so, imposing the remedy, the court took a boundless view of equitable remedies, describing equity as being, quote, characterized by a practical flexibility in shaping its remedies and by a facility for adjusting and reconciling public and private needs, end quote. Thomas writes, that understanding may have justified temporary measures to, quote, overcome the widespread resistance to the dictates of the Constitution, end quote, prevalent at the time. But as a general matter, quote, such extravagant uses of judicial power are at odds with the history and tradition of the equity, power, and the framers' design, end quote. I'm not going to bore y'all with the rest of the legalese. I'm just going to make this point. And we can talk about this on Office Hours Monday night if y'all want to. Clarence Thomas is saying, forget the political context. There ain't no flexibility. What did the founders say? Well, shit, the founders said, your ass need to be working in Georgia. Yeah, but they passed the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment. Exactly. How are you interpreting that? Ketanji Brown Jackson hits them with that all the time. What is the legislative record of the 14th Amendment? They ignore that. No, they want to go back to what legal scholars would call a pre-Lochner stage. This is the 1930s. In other words, they want the federal government to get out of the way of the states. They do whatever the hell they want. Up to and including some of the most absurd things you can imagine. So if you think for a minute that Roe is overturned so they can return the issue to the states, yeah, that's step one. Stage two will be to impose a federal ban. If they can get enough people in the Congress, the House of Representatives, and the Senate, and a president, they will sign a federal ban on abortion. And guess who's going to uphold it? The United States Supreme Court. Elections don't matter, though. If you say, well, that ain't my thing, okay, fine. Think about the environment. You want to be able to breathe? They're going to wipe out the administrative state. That is the EPA. That's the FAA. Y'all on airplanes this Memorial Day weekend, right? All of that. The idea of administrative courts, no, it should be Congress that does all that. Hey, I got the strap. I want to blow somebody away. No problem. Go with God, except you black. Second Amendment, purists. Let's just start shooting people. So on this Memorial Day weekend, as we think about the death of Big George Floyd, and the fact that this time 4 years ago, people were praying to go in the streets as COVID converged with that, the death of Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery earlier that year, the death of Big George Floyd this weekend 4 years ago, and the insurrection that Google and Microsoft and all the companies threw all that diversity, equity, inclusion money around, and Joe Biden made Juneteenth a national holiday, and everybody held their breath. Is it over? 2021? Not yet. Is it over? 2022? Not yet. Is it over? 2023? I think it might be over. Is it over? 2024? Oh yeah, Drake versus Kendrick. They forgot about it. Cool. All right. Now let's go. Oh, wait a minute. Wait a minute. We have to regain the momentum of memory even of 4 years ago, when we were at the birth of these Saturday sessions we've had, and before there was even a narrative in Nubia. So we can continue this on Monday night. Happy Memorial Day weekend, everybody. And of course, Chicago, if you're in Chicago, near the Logan Center for the Arts, in about an hour, Central Time, 11 to 2, Val Gray Awards Memorial will be there. That's where Kwaku Larry Crow and Mama Labisi are there at the memorial for Val Gray Ward. Val Gray Ward, one of the great culture keepers. Something else. Oh yeah, Baba Adesoje. Please, man, you can come in the office hours and announce this to everybody. We're going to do June the 1st on the resolutionaries. And I saw, come on back, Prof. I saw Morgan Spurlock made transition from Supersize Me.
Yep. Yes. And it was so weird because I interviewed him. He was in the studio in New York, and we hung out. He had a pop-up chicken place because he did a documentary on chicken and how free range is not really free range. And so he took me to a place that it was a concept of having like actual free range chicken and actual living wages. And he's just a really nice guy. I know he battled with alcoholism and maybe some other things. But his Supersize Me was revelatory, in terms of like what does it look like to have a diet of just McDonald's. For many of folk who live in certain neighborhoods, that's really what their options are in those food deserts. And it was great to watch him also look at income inequality. A person that had a purpose. Yeah, he made transition.
Indeed.
Yeah.
And you know what's crazy? The New York Times made this note today. Even as for a moment, think of as you what you say with George Floyd. In a moment, McDonald's and fast food start talking about reform, and now McDonald's stock higher than ever. And he said, what he said. I mean, so in the wake of Supersize Me, the whole fast food industry. Okay, all right, all right, all right, all right. In fact, it's so funny.
Right. It's the exact same thing.
Yes, yes. That's what we have to remember. Do y'all remember that stuff will kill you? All them healthy options, they weren't doing that. Morgan. So okay, that's good. I'm glad I'm glad. I didn't realize that. We have to your archive is on fleck. We need to hear that interview. You might have to replay that one.
No, actually, I think I'm gonna post it on YouTube today. I think the audio, this is before we even knew about a YouTube or cared about it.
But you recorded it though, so we
Oh
have it.
yeah, we have the audio. So
Yeah,
I
please,
will
please.
probably put that up today.
Yeah, please do that.
Yeah, yeah. We are. I'm so grateful to be here. I'm in the chat, both chats, and they are very different. Even though a lot of Nubians, thank y'all for coming over just to hit the like button and gather folk from time to time. I
Oh
appreciate
yeah, no question. Yeah,
appreciate that. Because it's like YouTube is an echo chamber.
sure.
A lot of people just yelling into the void or consuming content that you know uh underscores what they already believe, but doesn't stretch them to think more nimbly
Yeah.
about the world, so they come here and they got opinions, but you're a whole ass professor that has
Oh,
studied
but
some things
I
and
know.
read every day different
Oh,
things
no
and,
question. No question.
it's like but we have these call and repeats, we repeat these talking points, no more
No
different
question.
than Trump supporters.
No
It's all
question.
cultish. It's all cultish.
No
Let's
question.
all let's all get out of the cults
No
and
question.
become real, true, free people who think deeply about these things. But
Yes. Oh, I
yeah,
see. I see. Yeah. Hey, look. We were having actually Lamont and I were having this conversation. We need to do it on air talking about Abby Phillip at CNN with Cameron. I see somebody and they should have told Cameron. First of all, just to be clear, I know we were wrapping up, but you having more experience about this than probably all of us. Was there any way that Cameron didn't know what he was supposed to talk about when he came on here? I know you've talked about it, but I'm just
no,
saying,
no,
you know.
he knew what he was doing. He wanted to promote his sex thing, and
Exactly.
he had no respect for that platform because here's the truth. They have more viewers on he and Mace than
Mate,
CNN. So he's like, I'm coming into a different audience. I'm going to promote my stuff. I'm going to
exactly.
clown them because I have no respect for this. And part of it, there's part of me that's like, that's what they get. You
Uh,
know, that's what they get. I don't like that he did it to Abby Phillip,
well, let me
because
ask you that too. Was she set up? I mean, in other words, did the producer? I mean, I'm trying to figure out. Well, I think we all are. No.
I'm gonna blame her too because at
Okay.
some point,
Because she's professional.
I had old dirty bastard son come into the studio with a mask on and acting really strange, and I like cut the mic, and so you're going to leave because this is not how we conduct ourselves as human beings,
Yes.
and let's go to break. And when we come back, he won't be here. And good day. I had a couple of people come in with that kind of energy.
So she had done
So
that.
you're doing this fake decorum thing because I'm professional, but you're in the face of unprofessional behavior, and you challenging that doesn't make you unprofessional. It makes you a human being in that moment. And you're also demonstrating for all of you young people watching at home how you deal with somebody who comes in and disrespects and plays in your face. Right. And it's not a clap back, and you don't have to, come up with 6 B's and baby girl and all of that. You can
Right.
still maintain your very proper way that you speak and let that person know this is unacceptable. You're a 48-year-old man.
Come on.
That would have been my first thing. You're
Okay.
48 years old.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so why? Just a couple more questions because this is a unique opportunity, I think. Because as you said, the YouTube thing is here. Newbie is different space. We why not Mace instead of
Maybe May
Cameron?
said no. I mean, you don't know that May said yes.
Facts. That's what I'm asking.
So
Yeah,
we don't.
right.
I don't know the inner workings. I'm
We
sure
don't
they
know
probably
enough past
they
that part.
probably did. I mean, no smart producer would pick Cameron over Mace, who was actually there with the shiny suits, and Mace
Exactly.
be the one that'll make you moan.
Exactly. Come on now.
Should I pull another book out? No, I won't do that.
Do it. Do it. Do it.
I don't
Come
think I
on.
have
Do it.
Mace's book here, but yeah, I spent a lot of time with him doing
I
his
know
book.
you did. That's what I'm
Yeah,
asking.
yeah.
That's right.
Life after the lime. Anyway.
Come on now. Come on now. No. I mean, this is important because, like you say, everybody got a link on YouTube. I was laughing because I seen some things on YouTube this last week that really echo to me as evasions of what we're doing. And I'm just laughing like, don't nobody care about that? But like you said, because everybody has something, everybody has something. So this is, to me, a unique opportunity. You just giving us a tutorial on how to parse through this stuff. Because they had all kind of opinions, but you said it. We don't know. And you know Mace. I mean, that's
I
obviously
don't
the thing.
know him
Well, I'm
anymore.
saying you know him enough to
Right.
know that wasn't unless he said no. I mean, but we
Probably
don't know
definitely
enough.
said no. Yeah, because why do you need to? Like when I get invited places, especially on television, I have turned down over the last actually since I started because they wanted me to be on TV, right? The corporate people. And I made a conscious decision to not do TV, to not be on because my audience is bigger than theirs. So
How about that?
why would I bring this into a space that will diminish me, give me 2 minutes to talk when I have 3 hours Monday through Friday to say all of the things with so many more people? And so what am I gaining from that other than a little Chiron? And I do know also psychologically, if we see people on TV, we value them. But if we're in the business of changing appetites, I can't be in those spaces so that you feel like, oh, now Karen has arrived. No, you need to come over here. And Rush Limbaugh didn't have to do that. And he
How about that?
damn sure was selling millions of books on Paul Revere, dumb stuff. People
Come on.
because he had a radio audience that rocked with him no matter what. Howard Stern doesn't have to do TV. So
That is
I
amazing.
made a conscious decision to not do TV. Now some people need to do TV because that's where you get validated in the psyches of people, because that's when you've arrived. But you arrive when you talk with people every day, when you're in community with people, when you feed people every day, when you're digging wells for people every day. That lasts long after the flash on television for those few minutes when you get that nice check, because it's a nice check. Let me say, somebody has done it. It's a nice check. But are we here for checks? Are we here for balances?
Woo!
I feel like
Look, I want to look. I wish I wish we could stop there, but you know what? I have to. And if y'all want to look at, I think it's 54 and then we went to 168 in terms of our conversations. But because it's Memorial Day weekend, we always want to remember the fact that we started that. So checks and balances, I love it. You looking for checks, you looking for balances. So many people gave their lives in the struggle for us to free ourselves. And they weren't all Black. In fact, most of them were white, even though they weren't necessarily fighting to free us. They did fight to serve their country. And among the Black people, we were fighting to free us. Just like those Native Americans put on that flag on there and get that gun because, hey, the country that we're defending includes the country I lived in before y'all were here. Our people fought to free themselves. And in 1865, when those Africans reconfigured that racetrack, that old racetrack in Charleston, South Carolina, and started that ritual, when they did that, and eventually it catches on and reconfigures and becomes Memorial Day, and they come back to that space to convene, as Lamont said yesterday, they commune with their ancestors. A lot of people traveling this weekend, a lot of people being with family. We'll be, this time last year, 168, we were literally at the museum in Wilberforce. And as we saw last, we'll be back there on the 8th of June. So, we say Happy Memorial Day, but maybe that's not the phrasing. Maybe it should be, we should always remember those whose lives were ended prematurely, whether they had on a United States Color Troop uniform, or whether they were a brother coming out of Cup Foods in North Minneapolis, or whether they were a young sister after her shift as an EMT who got murdered by the damn police in Louisville, or a young brother trying to get a jog in, walking around in the neighborhood who got slaughtered by a couple of deputy white nationalist patter-rollers in Georgia. Everybody who lost their life prematurely because of the thing that we have to transform. it's a good weekend to think about them.
Yeah.
So
And we've done this, which is 220 now,
two, two, two,
episode
two.
68 was the first convening 2021 where you really did a deep dive into Memorial Day, and I had a notebook full of notes.
Oh yeah, we got
I
it.
did.
We got it. It's there.
Yeah,
It's there.
so yeah, do a little work. It's like I know we come
A
here and
little
it's
work.
like, feed me, Seymour. No, 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 it's all there. All the food is there, and it's there plentifully.
It's there.
So, and we've been gracious enough to keep it on YouTube. I wanted to put everything behind the paywall to get people to help us build the thing that we need to build. And you were like, nope, everybody needs to have it. No, I'm
But
just saying people need
we
to
add
see
value though.
even
We add
things
value
back
behind
and
the
forth. We don't necessarily, 100% agree, but we're nimble enough to say, all right, I value what you're saying, and
That's
all
true.
right,
That's
we'll
true.
see what happens. We'll see
See
what
what
happens.
happens.
Yeah.
And for those of you who think that everything out here is no, you all know, everybody in Nubia knows we add a whole lot of value, because a lot of what we talking about today, we're gonna be over on the other side doing that. You can't get the Netra class, the yoga, you can't the Amen, you can't do the Afro studies class we want to do, the second iteration, not all that's over there, and we just getting started.
Or have a man light the world on fire and then come into Nubia to explain even why he didn't have on those caps and gowns.
Exactly.
I mean, that was so powerful, and where he got the white that he wore from Africa, like that was a conversation. I was sitting there because I had questions, and you asked this question. I was like, okay, Dr. Black, and it was so nice to listen to him talk about that, and he's still brimming and buzzing because everybody was magnified. But yeah, that was to get that backstory. You're not gonna get that anyplace.
You're not gonna get it anywhere. That's exactly right. So if you're one of those hundreds of thousands and who are watching, seeing Dr. Daniel Black's commencement speech, like you said, we all had a couple of thousand people had a long conversation with him. He walked us through chapter and verse, like literally every choice he made. So that's right. That's what we're doing.
So let's end with a little bit of him from
there we go.
I want to get it from his Instagram page, because there's people pulling his speech and putting it on their TikTok and stuff and earning money off of him. But let's center Dr. Daniel Black's Instagram page, where he's posted his own little clip. And so I'm
love you.
So grateful. I love you too.
Yes,
I love you too. Let me
go. See y'all Monday night.
All right, let me do this.
Here they come, y'all. Here they come. Here they come, y'all. Here they come. Here they come, y'all. Here they come. Doctors, lawyers, writers, business owners, teachers, healers, rappers, preachers. Here they come, y'all. Here they come. Psychologists and sociologists and anthropologists and ethnomusicologists and paleontologists. Here they come, y'all. Here they come. Anesthesiologists and cosmetologists, dermatologists and embryologists, ontologists, epidemiologists, ophthalmologists, radiologists, blackologists. Here they come, y'all. Here they come. Computer scientists, mechanical engineers, nurses, architects, radio, television, film producers, economists, accountants, marketing executives, chemists, business analysts. Here they come, y'all. Here they come. Musicians, mathematicians, astronauts, philosophers, pharmacists, dentists, historians, speech therapists, HR specialists, painters, dancers, actors, janitors, street sweepers, post office workers, plumbers, electricians, paramedics, bakers, construction workers, hairdressers, insurance agents, librarians, veterinarians, humanitarians. Here they come, y'all. Here they come. The dream of the slave, the hope of the angels, the promise of the ancestors, the answers to grandmama's prayers, the guarantee of granddaddy's work. Here they come, y'all. Here they come. The cure to cancer is sitting right here. The antidote for sickle cell anemia is sitting right here. The great negotiator of war and peace is sitting right here. The next generation of black billionaires is sitting right here. Here they come, y'all. Here they come. Listen, Clark Atlanta University, home of the Holy Ghost.